Welcome, everyone. Okay, I'd like to call this Owensboro Board of Commissioners special called meeting, May 22nd, 2018, to order. And at this time, I would ask City Clerk Beth Cecil to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jay Vallada.
Here.
Commissioner Larry Condor.
Here.
Mayor Tom Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Bob Glenn.
Here.
Commissioner Pam Smith-Wright.
Here.
All right. Next item on the agenda is to consider the financial report for the period ending March 31st. I usually be asked to call on Angela Hamrick to give this report. Ms. Hamrick?
Mayor and Commission.
Yeah, get that thing close.
Yes, Mayor and Commission. Is that better?
Yes?
I'm happy to give the financial report for the month ended March 31st, 2018. Our general fund revenues through March of $39,880,319 were $288,624 over budget, primarily due to insurance premium license fee, property taxes, and component unit dividend. Our general fund expenditures of $36,668,632 were $1,664,500 under budget, primarily due to savings in personnel and timing in maintenance, supplies, and professional and technical services. The revenues and expenditures and other funds are in line with the year-to-date budget, with the following exceptions as of this report, and that's the transit fund, which is under budget, and federal and state grant revenues due to timing. And I understand that we should have all our draws that we should be getting through the month of March. We should be receiving that hopefully within the week, by the end of the month. So good news on that. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And I'll ask Beth if she'll pull up the graph. And if you'll refer to the graph, the green bar is our revenue stream at the old rates, and that's $36.1 million. The blue bar represents our revenues year-to-date through March at the new rate, which is $39.88 million. The red bar is our expenditures at $36.7 million. At the old rate, you'll notice that we would have a year-to-date deficit, and that deficit would be $603,790. But with the new rates, we have a surplus of $3,211,687. And if you'll notice in your booklet, our expenditures are higher than our revenues. And as we get into the warmer months, as I've been saying throughout the year, we'll be catching up. As far as year-to-date, our surplus will even out. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Don't want them to even out, do we? We want not to spend so much. Anybody have any questions from the commission?
Well,
Commissioner Glenn?
one question. So when you talk about narrowing down, obviously the weather will be good. We'll begin paving sidewalks and streets. That would be one
Certainly,
additional expense.
Certainly. In the recreation and the general fund, as well as the enterprise fund, there'll be activity pick up there. You'll see work on the streets. You'll see things pick up with the warmer months.
So what do you project, and this may not be a fair question, we're at 3.2 now. What do you project that to drop down to by the end of the fiscal year?
That's a guess, and it's subject to change.
Absolutely.
And city manager will be referencing that in our budget presentation.
Okay, it's in the budget.
So I can speak to it now, or we can wait.
Well, why don't we keep it a big surprise? We'll do it at the end, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Good enough.
And thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome, Bob. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll make a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hamrick.
You're welcome, Mayor.
Okay, that's it for today. We'll appreciate all of y'all coming. Item 4, 2018-2019 budget presentation, the last for City Manager Bill Parrish. Mr. Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to welcome you all to the 18-19 budget brief, which is for the period beginning 1 July and lasting till June 30th of 2019. This is the staff's attempt to turn your priorities into dollars and cents in the budget. This is a staff recommendation. We will seek your guidance, your rudder corrections to the ship to make it your budget. Every effort is made to ensure transparency in this brief. This is a public meeting. broadcast live and available for playback on TV 75 and our website. It can be played on demand at the city's YouTube channel. We will push links out to the public and accept questions back on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, there are 2 public readings that will allow public comment during those ordinance readings. Our agenda today will give you background to the budget preparation process that influenced how we wrote the budget. We'll review expenditures, review revenues, and then forecast that budget moving ahead to 2021, which is the same period we discussed painfully last year about how to get the budget back on track to restore our reserves. Now, by way of background, we have a strong local economy that was a major factor in writing this budget. We're seeing growth in regional shops and national chain restaurants driven by core growth in the new TIF districts and in old established businesses, which are growing in Owensboro. In turn, that's driving regional growth, and our core growth has been recognized nationally. Looking forward, the seeds of growth have been planted for the future, and our growing economy fuels city government resources. In the smallest statistical area where employment is viewed, that is at the county level, Davis County grew 3,000 jobs. 3,000 folks are employed now over 2 years ago than were before. I would say most of that growth is inside the city of Owensboro. In fact, our economy has stayed strong over the last 10 years, with local unemployment, green on this slide, consistently outperforming the state economy in blue and the national economy in red. Now, this strong economy helps us on the revenue side of the budget. As we move forward towards expenditures, let me start with an executive summary of the entire brief. First of all, I would characterize this as a continuation budget. There are few additions in this budget for you to review. This budget absorbs the increased pension cost from the state. It continues the planned property tax growth, allowing revenues to outpace expenditures for another year in order to rebuild our reserve and place the reserves back where they should be over that 4-year period we discussed last year. Now, the 18-19 budget is divided into 5 fund categories. If you'd like to follow along, I'll be in yellow tab 1 in your budget book.
Thank you, Whitney.
On the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see that the general fund is the largest fund. It includes most departments. You think of that as services and support. The next column, special revenue funds, include things such as your community vision, funded separately by the 0.33 of the occupational net profit, the economic development fund, funded primarily out from the airport businesses, federal grants, etc. In the center, you'll see the capital projects fund that go beyond your community vision. For example, the parking garage and Bluegrass are located there. The next column, enterprise funds, can be thought of as business operations of the city of Owensboro, where fees fully or partially pay for a service. For example, in sanitation, the fees they pay monthly fully provide for sanitation services, no tax dollars involved. On the recreation side, the public pays some of the part of recreation, but the general fund subsidizes the recreation fund, so to some extent it is subsidized by all taxpayers. That's the enterprise funds. And to the far right, internal service funds, and that's where departments pay each other for business so that we can track the actual cost in each department of doing operations. For example, if the police department comes to the garage for an oil change, that comes out of the police department budget, is paid to the garage. Now, the total budget, the entire city budget, is $120,467,008, but the out-the-door dollars, taxpayer dollars going out the door, are actually $14 million less than that because of those internal service fund dollars that are generated in one department and passed to another. So the total actual out-the-door cost is $106,041,077. Now, as we talk about expenditures, you'll see and note that all of our personnel budgets have been impacted and see growth. There's a common theme across all the personnel department budget, all the budgets in personnel. The first area is pensions. The city is required to be in the state pension system. Now, we saw costs go up in 17-18, our current fiscal year that we're in, that doesn't end until the end of June. That cost went up 2%. But for the next 3 years, pension cost from the state increased by 12% per year. That's almost $3 million over that 4-year period that we talked about last year to rebuild our reserve. Now, for 18 and 19, for next fiscal year, that's $817,753 spread across each of the departments. So you'll see personnel budgets increase to cover that cost. Now, a second common theme in the personnel budgets are rising labor costs, and we'll spend some time here. That's driven by our growing economy, which rewarded us on one side with greater revenues, but hurts us on the other side because of the tight labor market. Worker shortages are driving up the cost of labor via competition. There aren't enough workers to go around, meaning higher costs for us to recruit and to retain our employees. Companies are hiking wages across the company. So severe is a labor shortage in America that the nation's second largest employer, the U.S. Army, lowered its recruiting standards. It's hard to believe the folks that are being recruited right now. The largest employer, Walmart, has already raised wages, and I hear from my department heads some of the reason folks are leaving is they can make more at Walmart. It's a common refrain. A third theme that you'll see in personnel budgets is that health insurance costs are up this year almost $300,000. So grouping all of those personnel budget reasons for increases together, you'll see the first is health insurance is going up $300,000. Almost all employees get a step increase every year of 1.25%. We start our employees at a low rate of pay compared to, for example, Walmart. But we tell them there's a 1.25% increase every year. Good times and bad times, so we don't keep up in some times that we do in others. That step increase will increase cost to the city by $162,552 next year, spread across all the departments. COLA, cost of living increase. We have been, for the last 10 years, matching our COLA recommendation to Social Security, sometimes as low as 0.5% per year. Social Security this year is 2%. I am recommending, because of the tight labor market, more discussion to follow, an additional 1% for all of our employees. That's 3% increase in COLA to recruit and retain. That is $438,992. Next, you'll see targeted retention. I'm requesting $197,322 for our worst, most difficult to retain employees areas, and I'll outline that. I believe it's the next slide. And the pension costs that we've already covered, $817,753. That means a common theme spread across all the departments. When you look at that personnel section of every department's budget, we have an increase of $1.9 million for personnel. Now let me further justify the need for those additional dollars for that 1% COLA and the targeted incentives. Now we're looking at turnover above 10% in the following departments. We didn't take anybody at 8% or 9%. We drew a line and said departments above 10%. Now we recognize that we've lost the recruiting value of the pension. What we used to say to somebody is, you're coming in at a lower rate of pay, but listen, stick around. Unlike the private sector, you get a pension. You stay 27 years, or you stay 20 years for hazardous, you get a pension. You get a reward for the lower pay. That's gone. Essentially, the pension for new folks is a 401k. So that tool is gone to us. Recognizing we have competition for recruiting and retention for workers, and we're losing the battle. We have to spend more money. Look at this slide. The worst area is CDL drivers. In order to drive one of our large trucks, to put a snowplow on the front and clear, you have to have a commercial driver's license, which is a step above my operator's permit for a car. So severe is the problem that several years ago, we started taking employees who didn't have a CDL, and we trained them over a 6-month period. At the end of that 6-month period, you see from the numbers, 26% of our commercial driver's license employees in the street department are leaving. they left last year. 26%, a quarter of them are gone. So those are the worst problems. You see it down in Public Works Transit, in Public Works Grounds, in Public Works Buildings, where they all have to have a CDL license so that even though I'm an electrician, when times get bad, I get in the snowplow and drive the snow truck. Accounting clerks, 25% turnover. The folks that collect our money, the folks that handle our money, and the folks that investigate why a certain company did not pay or a certain individual did not pay their full share. Police officers, 13% turnover, and 911 dispatchers, 11.5. If you go all the way down, next you would see fire department at 10%, but I drew a line that said above 10%, you will see other departments also. Going to the next slide, let's...
Can I just ask you,
please.
in the
Yes, sir.
exit interviews for these people, what are they telling you, Josh? Can you tell us? Didn't mean it, I just
Please.
curious,
Can
I
we
mean,
cover some of
if
that?
we don't, you're gonna cover some of it?
Some of that, but... Okay.
Okay. Whatever you wanna do, I'm just checking on the exit interviews. I may not like the city elected officials, I mean, that may be one of the reasons they leave.
So I wanted to focus on OPD for just a second because they're getting one of the targeted increases. Not everybody's getting it, they're getting targeted. This is a Messenger Inquirer headline. You see 3 Davis County Sheriff's Office officers leading some other folks, but 3 sheriff's deputies going through active shooter training. They're leading an assault. I've circled it in red because all 3 transferred from the Owensboro Police Department. They get free health insurance at the county. That's a value of $3,600 a year. They have a very liberal take-home policy with their official vehicle. Unlike us, where they can drive it back and forth to work and then park it, they can drive it home, put their kids in it, go to a soccer game, come back, put their wife in it, go to the grocery store, come back. There's a lot of advantage to that. Now, I'm not knocking the county. It's a great recruiting tool, a retention tool, but there's a cost associated with it. The county, KRS, Kentucky State Police, KSP, also give education incentives that we do not. Our officers are leaving for Alorica, they're leaving for industry to work in plants, they're leaving to work in other departments. Now, beyond the loss of experience, it's expensive to replace officers. The left-hand bubbles you see are recruiting cost, what it takes to try to get folks to come to work for the city. The second set of bubbles, you see training cost, and on the far right, you see equipping and pre-certification cost. For example, when an officer joins the force, he gets here after school, but he's not ready to go out on the street himself. The total cost before that officer can put a key in a car, turn the ignition, and put it in drive, go off on patrol on his own, is over $100,000. So the cost to replace an officer is $100 grand each, plus it's taken us about 22 months on average to get somebody from the recruiting stage into the department, out on the street, ready to do their business. Now let's drill down on OPD losses and look at 2 graphs. These are both busy, but they're important graphs. The top graph is what I call a cohort graph. And what it shows in 2 different colors is people that joined the police department at one time and people from that same group, that same cohort, who left. So if you look at the 10 years, all the way at the right is 2008, all the way to the left is January of 18. The blue bar means all the officers that joined together at a particular period of time. The red bar, out of that total group of blue, the red is what's remaining on the force. 3 months really jump out at you. February of 14, June of 12, and April of 09, we have over 50% attrition rate. We're losing people in that 4 to 6 years on patrol experience looking at this graph. Why are they leaving? The next slide will tell you. Some are retiring. That's the second largest number. But the largest number is they're not completing their 20 years towards retirement. They're just not staying. They're going to Alorica. They're going to private industry. They're going to other offices. Now, I don't know if now Josh and Chief, you talk to each one. Last week, Chief sent me an email. He got 4 resignations or retirements in one day. I don't know, Chief, Josh, if you two want to tag team on this discussion, the mayor's question on why are they leaving?
Mayor, Commissioners, as far as retirement letters that I get, they reference finances. Officers hate to leave, but they say that the best thing for them financially and their family is to go to places like Alaris, Southern Star. We've lost 2 individuals in the last month to Southern Star. Another one's leaving at the end of this week to go to Alaris for more money. And it's hard to compete with that.
So, over the past 10 years, is that how we got behind, or is it just now that we're behind in our salaries? I mean, this didn't just, looking at that graph, it just didn't start last year. I mean, is this a compilation of the last few years when maybe you didn't get any, or whatever you got wasn't enough, or?
Well, it's not enough, and it's never been enough.
Never will be enough. Well,
Right, exactly. But, and it's a combination of many things. The pension system, Kentucky changed to Tier 3 back in 2014. That hurt. We are experiencing the effects of that right now. So it used to be you work 20 years and you could retire, and like Mr. Parrish said, you get rewarded for all your hard work and the low salaries coming in. I started off at $18,500 a year back in 1991 with the hopes of eventually, when you retire after 20 years, you would make that money up somehow. So we all fight, we struggle to support our families. When the Kentucky legislature changed to Tier 3 and increased the number of years the individual had to work before they could retire to 25, that's very significant. So, I mean, we are dealing with it. All of Kentucky's dealing with it, except those agencies like Jeffersontown, who they recruit mostly lateral police officers, transfers, and they start them off somewhere in the neighborhood of $55,000 to $58,000 a year. So you go to Jeffersontown, officers are happy. They'll respond to anything. They don't care. They don't have a recruiting and retention issue there. And I know that this community cannot afford to pay that kind of money, but that's what we are dealing with. That's the struggles of the police department, the fire department, all the other city departments, finances.
Mayor, I'd like to add that you're absolutely right. This didn't start yesterday. We brought to the commission last year, I believe it was a 5% increase that the commission awarded to OPD and OFD, and that was a help. But go back to those original slides where you see the Army recruiting folks that have no business being in the Army, and Walmart. It's getting worse now than it ever was before. It was driven before 5, 7, 8 years ago by finances, what we could afford. But it's getting worse now because of this hot labor market. So you have the local economy, it's doing great. On one side, we're excited about that because revenues are coming in. The other side, I can't compete for labor at the prices we're spending. But you are correct, Mayor, it did not start this year.
So the thought process in the private sector, let's just say, of when you go to work for someplace, do you think many people retire after just 20 years working for the same company? And saying that, is it because of the hazardous duty that complicates that issue? Because most people don't get a retirement at 20 years and get benefits and health insurance and all that stuff. Most people are working to 65 and 70 right now. So I'm trying to correlate it to the private sector. I know it's difficult because y'all have to go where I won't go. So, but it's just, if we're going to fix this problem, instead of just kind of saying it's bad every year, we got to figure out some way to fix it. And you're knowledgeable enough to maybe, I know if everybody got paid $50,000, everybody'd be happy. I'd be, if I got paid $50,000 for doing this job, I'd be happy too. But there's got to be a correlation to the private sector that the city manager is making because the employment is so tight. But nobody's retiring after 20 years in the private sector that I know of that much.
Jump in for just a second, Mayor, on that. And that is, I think the problem is what we've had is this government system of stick around and get your retirement. That's gone. So what the argument I'm making is we're going to have to adjust our pay rates to be like, we're essentially going to have a civilian style government forced on us by the fact that we no longer have a pension. and our salaries are much lower. We're going to have to compete with the private sector. I think you hit the nail on the head. We no longer have that pinch rate. Now, folks like me who have been here for 17 years, we do, but the newer folks don't. When did we start changing tiers, Josh? Yeah, so it's kind of relates to that slide a little bit. But and the decrease just isn't in police; it's in all of our departments.
And I'd like to add too,
Sure.
because your question was in the private sector if people, retire after 20 years. In most cases, they don't. However, on the hazardous duty side, you don't have civilians that are expected to walk into burning buildings.
Yeah, I just said that.
yeah.
I mean, you're doing stuff that I don't do.
And you've got officers, nowadays, I used to be able to say, and I've said this before, to people that, hey, it's a dangerous job, I don't know. And I'm like, hey, Owensboro is calm, you don't have to worry about that. I've never drawn my weapon to shoot at anyone. But I know that we've had officers that have had to, shoot at individuals. We've had officers shot at over the past 3 years. So that detracts from people wanting to apply for these positions because, A, low pay, high risk, low reward, it just doesn't equate. And you add that to the fact that we are dealing with a millennial population that thinks about what's in it for me. So it's, hey, you put your best foot forward. I want to be a detective when you hire me. I want to work in street crimes. You have to put your boots on and work your way up. Our standards will not be lowered just because, we have a tough time recruiting. So,
Righty. Where are we?
So I'm ready to move on if you're.
yeah.
If a good mayor, please.
Please.
Sure.
Chief,
Your hand up, Bob?
I did too.
you referenced J-Town, which is just outside of Louisville, I
Yes.
assume. So what they may be doing the same thing what the county has been doing or had been doing with our police officers. You basically are over-recruiting them is what you're doing. Avoiding that $100,000 you just put up there, I assume that's what they're doing.
Right.
So their ideas is that, hey, I'm going to spend $100,000 here, or I'm going to spend it here. I'm going to do it one way or the other. So which way can I do it to effectively keep my officers where they don't go somewhere else? Because wouldn't it be great if you could go to a sheriff, a deputy, and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to now bring you back in. And at what level is that? What level would it take in order for that, not only for it to stop, but for some of the other ones to go, well, hey, they got a better deal going on over there. Maybe I'll go there. Do you know what that might be?
No, but you'll hear in the presentation, we're going to take some steps to try to help that along. And I don't want to steal anybody's thunder.
I want to be very careful not to go too deep. I think this is going to be very difficult, rather than bracketing the issue, going too high, and then several years later having to disappoint people and come back down. We're going to try to ease into it. The other thing that will affect this is part of this is a result of a very hot economy right now. How long do economies stay hot? Well, I'll say later in the brief, since World War II, the average post-recession recovery has been 6 years. We're in year 9. So do we jump far to the right of the pay chart and then a year from now, 2 years from now, have to draw it back and talk to people about we're going to have to cut your pay? It was an attempt last year. The commission recognized it, gave a 5% increase above and beyond, pretty significant. We're going to ask for, it's different for every department that we have these shortages in, but we're going to go in and ask for increases now for each of them.
So what was the increase the last 8 years to the police and fire?
Just the standard cost of living.
COLA?
It's the 1.25% that everyone
Step in the
gets.
COLA.
Step in COLA.
Okay.
And if you want to go to the backup slide now? It's only 3 years back. Let me see if I can find this backup slide for just a second. We'll just show you. And Larry, you asked us to put this together yesterday, and we had discussion about what other.
Oh, it's going to make me sick.
Made me sick putting it together, Mayor. God damn. Back at me. Darn.
Yes. Un momento. Wait, let me get finished here and then
Well, that's what I had, it had something to do with that.
Bob, hand up.
Yeah, but let's get your question answered, that's all.
Well, you can keep talking. It might take me a minute, Mayor, to find
Okay,
this.
who wants to go down
All
there?
right, I've got a quick question. So it begs the question, the county gives free health insurance. Granted, we are a much larger force, right? I don't know how many folks Sheriff Kane has as an employee, but we're over 100 if we're at full strength. Am I right, about 120? If we're at full strength.
Yes.
So we've got a lot more people on our force. They're a smaller unit. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So how do they do, and you may not know the answer to this, how do they do the free health insurance?
Budget it, they just do it.
Okay, so they're not getting any kind of, they're not some special program for law enforcement or something? They're just funding it, okay. And their pay is more as well? Or is their pay about the same as ours?
They pay about the same, but they get education incentive and liberal use of their take-home fleet.
Okay.
Is that thing, my fault. Commissioner Smith, right?
Sorry. I just had a comment. You know, we're talking to them, and they keep saying that they've got this stuff coming down the pipe or further on in the discussion or in the budget review. And if we're doing it now and then they're going to come back and do it again, I mean, can we let him finish whatever it is he's doing and then go into it? Because we're going to be doing this stuff twice. I mean,
It won't hurt me to learn twice, but I mean, I can't remember that far. It's just in that brief.
no, I'm not
I
saying.
understand what you're saying.
I'm not saying not to ask questions, but
But if
when
they'll
we-
just tell us, we can answer that for you in a few minutes,
That's
and
what
then we
he's
can move
saying,
on.
and then, but we go on into it and they start talking about it, then we're gonna be here. I mean, this is my job, so I'll be here, but I'm just saying, that's just my opinion.
What I'm briefing here, Mayor, is that we need $197,000 to make additions to those specific ones we pointed out. The brief does not break down, it's going to be this much for people. But Josh is prepared to say, and I'll ask him to say right now, what is the police incentive? It's different for different agencies, but what's the police incentive?
Thank you, Chief.
Hi, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Josh Bachmeyer, the HR manager for the city of Owensboro. We kind of think about this as kind of a scalpel rather than a blanketed pay increase. So we kind of analyzed each individual department and recognized, where we're losing people and when we're losing those folks. So it is different for each individual department. I'll give you kind of some anecdotal evidence as to why we're presenting the $197,000 total. In these areas that we're targeting, we've done 85 recruitments in those areas in the last 3 years, 19 recruitments in calendar year 2018 alone. So that high turnover in several positions has resulted in increased workload for those that are left taking up that work. OPD is a good example. Since January, I believe their turnover rate was 13+%, and it's gotten no better. As a matter of fact, it's gotten worse. We've lost 11 more officers since January. 6 of those were resignations to other employers. And Mayor, you asked the question, why are they leaving? And I have heard very little other than pay. The benefits is a portion, but for folks in the street department, if you can go down the road or go to the county or go to a construction outfit for $1 more an hour or $2 more an hour, that makes a big difference to them. So it may be, not inconsequential to us, but at $1 more an hour, that's $2,000 more a year to them. But I'll go back to OPD. Those folks, we've lost 2 to Southern Star. Both of those were due to pay. One to Alaris. That gentleman let us know that due to the pay increase at Alaris, that he would be bringing home $700 more every pay period than both him and his spouse combined. So that makes a big difference to a gentleman like that. So in the police department, what we've done is looked at where we're losing these folks, and primarily we're losing them between 3 and up to 15 years of service. So we've kind of scalpeled that group out, and what we're presenting or proposing is a targeted retention bonus at 3, 6, 9, and 12 years of service, similar to a service recognition. So it's just a dollar amount based upon their years of service.
And it's a bonus, it's not a pay?
It's a bonus, that's right.
It's not on the...
It's not a blanket across, right? That's right. And that's typically where we lose them. We kind of feel like at 15 years of service, we probably have them. Those folks are tier 1 or tier 2. The problem becomes is, everybody that we hire now is tier 3. So that benefit is no longer there. So by far and large, the folks that we're losing are early in their career. In dispatch, we've lost 3 additional since the end of 2017 to 2 of them to resignations. They're going to better higher paying jobs. One issue with that department is obviously the shift work. So someone may be even willing to take a decrease in pay to go from a 3rd shift to 1st shift. So that's also a targeted area. Parks, we are just no longer able to fill positions at minimum wage. That's where we start out for the majority of our positions.
Talking about, Josh, the part-time folks that we hire.
On a mostly summertime
Summer help.
basis. That's right. They can go to McDonald's and make $8.19 an hour. They can go to Holiday World and make $9 to $10 an hour. So we're targeting kind of twofold in that department, especially lifeguards. Lifeguards are hard to staff. That used to be the job that everybody wants. However, we require them to pay for their lifeguard certification currently. So we're proposing to pay those folks an additional amount. What we're actually proposing is for that 3% COLA to just stick to the base rate. So it increases by 22 cents an hour, I think, which isn't a lot, and it doesn't change the world, but I think it'll help tremendously to a minimum wage position. IT, we have just a couple positions that we would like to make some administrative title changes from network systems technicians to network administrators. It's a small increase. That's one of the highest growing jobs in America right now. These are troubleshooters, and the last analysis I did, our base pay is about 20% lower than that job. Transit is also a big one. Bill alluded to the CDL drivers. We've made efforts to correct that in the past, and it's still not enough. When we have school systems paying $3 more an hour for part-time drivers, including benefits that we don't provide, and that's another schedule that we work nights and weekends, and at the school that's not applicable. Streets and stormwater, same thing, CDL drivers. So that's also a targeted increase. Finance, Bill spoke about the revenue clerks. Those folks are responsible for identifying and capturing the revenue stream of the city. It's a highly technical position. We do not require a college degree for it. We've lost, I believe, 4 in the last 3 years. So collectively, they have less than 6 years of experience. Very important position. We have great folks in that position right now that we need to keep. And that's by far the most. Actually, that's all the departments for the targeted positions. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you have for that.
Commissioner Condor asked us to put this chart together yesterday. It's not a direct comparison, but it gives you some idea, at least for our 3-year period, what the city is doing compared to other folks. So you come down, City of Owensboro in 16-17 gave a 0.5% COLA. That matched Social Security. The next year, 0.3. This year, we're asking for 3% for a total of COLA of 3.8%. Now, we also give a step increase. OMU, you see over that 3-year period, 5.5% and a step increase that is either close to equal or much larger than ours. The Riverport gives no step. They gave 8% COLA over the period. Fiscal Court, 5.5% plus 3% step every 3rd year, and RWRA 7.37 and a step of 1.62. So there are 2 ways to look at this. One is that the city of Owensboro is frugal, cheap. We don't spend money. We try to go as close a bone as we can, but the other side of the coin is we're falling behind. And last year was bad enough. You gave us that increase, but as this economy continues to be hot, and we're cautious not to go too far when it turns the other direction, we're recommending that you take some steps to move forward to compensate in specific areas, not everyone with these large retention increases, but we think it's necessary. Otherwise, we're going to call Wayne Shelton in the middle of the night. He can say, well, I can man about 4 trucks when a snowstorm. Or Art can say, I can man somebody later. I'm not, the commission has been wonderful about supporting where we need it. I'm identifying a need, though. It's coming up.
Thank you, Bill, for putting it together.
Yes, sir.
And Chief, I'm not growling at you. I'm just trying to figure out, you know, where we are and how in the hell do we get here. Okay, where are we now?
Sure,
Back on you.
Trying to get back, Mayor. There we go. Okay. So, it's not just a question of taking care of employees. It's actual a question of what's the cost to the taxpayer. So before someone gets certified and ready to go out on patrol or drive a snow plow to be able to do their job, over the last 3.25 years, we've spent $10.8 million to recruit, train, and have people ready to go. That's across all departments, and admittedly, it includes retirements. Retirements are natural attrition, but the cost of recruiting folks is very expensive. So you pay a little bit on the retention side, or you pay a lot on the other side trying to recruit those folks to bring them in. Our goal is to reduce this turnover cost, and unfortunately we'll have to increase wages to do that. So with that background, specifically in all the personnel department budgets, we want to turn to expenditures. There's been no change in the organization of the city, no significant change. The citizens are the owners, of course. All authority and leadership is vested in the commission as it sits on the dais today. The day-to-day management you entrust to me as the city manager or CEO of the company, and we operate with a small headquarters staff and 5 major departments. We're going to look at each department in turn, and I've asked Assistant City Manager Nate Pagan to brief administration first.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bill. Mayor, Commissioners, good afternoon. My brief includes what you see in yellow on the screen. That is the Commission, City Manager, the Mayor's Executive Assistant, including the AV staff and CSRs, the Assistant City Manager, City Clerk, Public Events, and the City Attorney. My brief excludes Community Development, which will follow me. Everything you see in yellow is the General Fund Division, and there is no change in staffing for next year. If you'd like to follow along in your book, I'll be on yellow, tab 2. The amount you see in yellow on the top of the screen of just under $2 million is the total amount of the administration budget for next year. It represents an increase of 2%. That is primarily driven by an increase in 5% in personnel-related costs. This is driven, of course, by the issues that Bill referenced earlier, primarily being pension contribution rates, but also salary increases and health insurance costs. The increase in personnel costs is offset by an 8% decrease in supplies, attributable to a decrease in technical supplies and computer equipment. Essentially, on the computer equipment, the items to be replaced next year are less expensive, primarily desktops, as opposed to this year, I think we skewed more toward laptops, which are more expensive. There's also a decrease of 5% for the other category, which is mostly a decrease in contractual services. That's a result of funds to be carried over for next year that will offset expenses, resulting in a savings to the city. Be happy to answer any questions you have. Otherwise, I'll turn the brief over to Abby Shelton.
Commissioner Condon.
Just one quick question, please. And I believe, talked briefly with City Clerk Beth Cecil about this, but House Bill 487 had to do with some of the advertising expenses that municipalities incur by advertising for everything. That's on a 2-year, I believe, number, but are we budgeting for the full advertising costs or not? Do you know? Or how that's being done?
Commissioner Condor, I'll address that. Danae Galloway, Deputy Director of Finance and Support Services. We've looked at House Bill 487. We've also asked the City Attorney, Steve Lynn, to look at that also. And we have a full budget for advertising. The House bill does not change the requirements that we use currently for advertising, so therefore we won't see any great reduction in the cost of advertising for the City of Owensboro.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, who's up?
Abby Shelton.
Okay, Ms. Shelton.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to bring to you the Community Development Department slide, which can be found in the General Fund Yellow Tab number 3. This department administers community development block grant and home partnership program entitlement funds, providing services for low-income populations of Owensboro. This department is very efficiently staffed by one full-time person, and there are no increases in staffing included in this budget. The total budget is down by 4%, or around $9,000 from last year's budget. That reduction is accounted for in primarily 2 places. But first, as in all departments, personnel costs are up by $8,000, driven by salaries, increased pension, and healthcare costs. In an effort to offset this increase, you will see a $700 reduction in supplies, every penny counts, as well as a removal of $16,000 from the other budget category, which will be rolled over funds from a landscaping grant for the Triplet Twist District and reinserted in next year. Within the past year, the Community Development Department has focused on continuation of the consolidated plan, which is scheduled to end in 2019. This focus will be in the Triplet Twist District. I anticipate $600,000 in total grant funds to be spent in the Triplet Twist District this year. In addition, Owensboro will continue to the fruitful partnership we've developed with the World Changers coming June 18th through the 23rd. The grant contribution of $18,000 will produce over $100,000 in economic impact for the 11 low-income homeowners and our city as they provide volunteer labor to perform exterior rehab work. I am happy to report that since the Triplet Twist District was implemented in 2015, the city has seen $2.5 million in public investment with return of $2.9 million in private investment. Also, thank you to a slight increase in federal funding this year, local taxpayers will directly support $81,652 out of my department's budgeted cost for the 2018-19 fiscal year. This is due to administration funds the city is allowed to draw against the federal funding we receive. I am happy to answer any questions. If not, I will turn the presentation over to City Manager Parrish.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton.
That completes, Mayor, Commissioners. Our headquarters staff will turn to our first of 5 major departments, Director of Finance and Support Services, managed by Angela Hamrick.
Yes, I oversee and have responsibility over 4 areas, and those being human resources, which is run by our human resource manager, Josh Bachmeyer, our finance department, which is run by our Deputy Director of Finance and Support Services, Danae Galloway, the information technology, which is better known as IT, which is run by our IT manager, Angela Bruner, and Geographic Information System, better known as GIS, which is run by our GIS manager, Will Carpenter. Each of these will be presenting their own budget, and I'll turn it over to Angela Bruner.
Thank you, Angela. Angela Bruner, the IT manager for the City of Owensboro. Mayor and Commissioners, I want to present the IT budget for fiscal year 18 and 19, and it is behind your yellow tab number 4. This is also a general fund department, so all of our funds come through the general fund. Our total budget is $1,877,000 with a slight increase over last year of $2,200. Personnel costs have the 6% increase that everyone is seeing, as Bill has described earlier, of $65,000. Our maintenance costs have a decrease of $50,000 due to implementing less expensive but more effective software. Also, we have implemented a new data backup system, which moved it from maintenance to our other category by purchasing a lease instead of purchasing the equipment. But we were able to get new and upgraded equipment for about the same price. So it was a good place to swap the money for. Our supply costs have a decrease of $26,000 due to reduced equipment needs for the fiscal year 18-19. And do you have any questions?
Commissioner Vellada.
City Manager,
Sir.
how come we can't get these slides prior to these presentations?
I worked on these all weekend and this morning. I worked on them. I'll give you next time the next city manager gives a brief. I have those given to you as they're prepared.
Thank you.
But all this information is in the budget book that we provided you last week.
Okay.
If there are no questions for me, I will turn this over to Will Carpenter, who will present the GIS.
Commissioner Glenn
budget.
has a question.
I have one quick question. So we've done several software upgrades. Have they helped save the city money in any form? Have they turned out to be more productive for us in terms of, collecting data and revenue streams, information like that? Have we been? Because when you upgrade with software, you hope to be more efficient and save money.
Yes, they have. I mean, since I've been in this position, one of our biggest upgrades was to put in an ERP system. That ERP system has made all of our departments have much more effective and be more functional with gathering their data and their information. They no longer have to come to IT to request special reports and things like that. We have put that information out into their hands so that they are more productive and not having to wait on my department to provide them some needs. Any software that we look to purchase is always looking for to add effectiveness. May not always cut expenses, but effectiveness goes a long way in someone being able to complete their jobs.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Anybody else? There's that talkative one. Carpenter.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Will Carpenter. I'm the GIS manager for the City of Owensboro. GIS is Geographic Information Systems. We are a support department that serve other departments, particularly public safety, engineering, and public works. I'm on yellow slide number 5. Thank you. Yellow slide number 5. You can see that we have a slight savings of 2%. And that's I'll get into in a moment. Personnel is up about 5% for the reasons that have already been discussed. Supplies are up 30%. That's due to a purchase of a new workstation. Capital savings, however, is down 52%, and that's due to a cooperative effort for aerial photography with the Property Valuation Administration. So we're not shouldering the entire cost of new photography. We share with partners when we find opportunities to do so. At this time, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Hearing none, thanks, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. And Finance will be briefed by Danae Galloway.
Mayor and Commissioners, Danae Galloway, Deputy Director of Finance and Support Services for the City of Owensboro. We'll be under yellow tab number 6. That's where you'll find the details for the Finance Department's budget. Finance Department is a department within the general fund. Our total budget for this year is $1,647,860, which is up 4%, or $60,411, and you find those numbers in yellow on your slide. This increase is due to personnel increase due to COLA retirement increases of 5%, or $63,773. Supplies are also up 4%, or $2,600, which is mostly due to timing and a computer replacement that's due for this year. And then my other category is down 4%, or $6,962, and that's due to decrease in credit card processing fees that we're seeing here at the city. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Josh Bachmeyer, our Human Resources Manager.
Hi again, Mayor, Commissioners. Josh Bachmeyer,
Oh, Josh.
Human Resources Manager for the city. My budget is contained
Thank you very much.
No problem. My budget can be found behind tab 7. It's contained entirely in the general fund. The gold information on my slide represents the total change for my area. Represents no changes in staffing levels. Highlights include personnel services, which represents the increase due to COLA, retirement, health insurance, as previously stated. Also included in that slide is the maintenance cost decreasing 46%, or $6,625. That's due to a negotiated reduction in the annual maintenance cost of our occupational health medicine software database. That houses all of our claims data for both work comp and general liability. The other category that is also listed includes increases in employee recognition due to additional anticipated retirements this year. We offer a watch or an obelisk and a retirement luncheon for those folks retiring, and we expect a few more to retire this year than last. Small decrease in recruitment is shown. That's not necessarily due to less recruitment. However, the majority of those positions that were added in the 17-18 budget in fire have been onboarded. The police, we have not yet. We are still working towards that, so that's the reason for that small reduction. Barring any questions, I'd like to turn it back over to City Manager Parrish.
Manager.
Mayor, Commissioners, that completes the first department. We'll now move towards public safety with Chief Elam briefing the police department.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, if you'd like to follow along with me, I'll be presenting on tab number 8. The Owensboro Police Department is a 24/7 operation with, that provides full service to this community, and I'd say quality professional service. The police department is part of the general fund. The department is staffed by 149 full-time and 27 part-time personnel. There are no increases in the staffing included in this budget. Currently, we are 17 full-time staff and 6 part-time personnel short. The total budget is in gold at the top. It's $13.5 million. That is up 7%, or some $849,000 from last year's budget. That increase is accounted for primarily in 4 areas. As in all departments, personnel costs are up. In our agency, it's up $836,000. There was an increase in our maintenance budget as well, due to software maintenance for APHIS, our automated fingerprint identification system, and Power DMS, which is our accreditation policy updates reviewing software that we purchased. That accounts for about $17,000. We also experienced an increase of $20,000 in vehicle maintenance to the 7 additional vehicles that were added to our fleet. Our criminal investigations camera system maintenance added an additional $4,000 to our overall maintenance budget. That's offset by decreases in supplies, which decreased by $28,000 due to replacement mobile radio installation costs that we did not have to pay this year. That was all taken care of in the 17-18 budget. We also saw a reduction of $7,000 in our training budget due to specialized training that we had last year to replace accident reconstructionists that retired. Now for our central dispatch budget, I'll direct you to Paul Nave, unless you have questions.
I got one question. You know, there's that thing in state government where you get reimbursed some kind of money if you go up there for training at E, they call it E something or other. You know what I'm talking about? You know, it's, I can't remember now. One of the police officers asked me about that. They got paid for going up there and doing training. You don't know what I'm talking about?
No.
Must slip. Okay, my bad. I know it's some kind of stipend for training that also.
I'm not
I'll remember. You don't know I'm in trouble, but I'll
Right.
try and remember it, because I know I read that somewhere.
Was it for the academy or some follow-on training, do you know?
It was in a bill that would allow, I think it was, you know, substantial amount of money, but maybe I just dreamt it. I don't know. I can't.
not familiar with that at all. But I like the idea if it's out there.
It's been out there. I'm sure it has. Huh?
We'll look for it.
Well, it was state money for.
Any additional questions for me?
Sorry. Okay.
Paul Nave.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Paul Nave, Owensboro Davis County Central Dispatch Director. My budget is a special revenue fund composed of City of Owensboro and the Davis County Fiscal Court, making my budget at a 73% this next fiscal year. I have 5 categories. My total budget is $2,998,175 with a 15% increase of $530,103. Personnel is 6% increase has been alluded to in the previous presentations regarding personnel. Our maintenance cost is up $70,000, and that's directly attributed to the CAD, the M25 maintenance cost for the M25 radio project that was not passed last year, that was put in the budget for this year. So that will sustain our infrastructure for communication with all the first responders via radio. That's our major way of communicating. Our radio system is what it is. So that's important. That's in there at $400,000. The next one is the supplies is down 82%, and that's directly related to the new CAD was taken out of last year's budget, out of this year's coming budget. It was in last year's budget.
CAD meaning?
What?
CAD meaning?
I'm sorry, excuse me. CAD is an acronym for Computer-Aided Dispatch, which is the software that we use to communicate to all the patrolmen, fire department, and document everything. Excuse me. The next one is capital. The capital is a substantial reduction, and that's because the surplus is the surplus variance is primarily due to the balance of the capital surplus account in the 17-18 amended budget, which is due to carryover from prior years' unused budgets. This is approved by the nominal board in order to facilitate unforeseen expenditures throughout the budget year. Any expenditures from this account requires approval from the nominal board to expend those monies. So the big things that want to address is the P25 system. That's important. That's in this budget. The next one is the CAD that was in last year's budget. It's taken out of this year's budget, so it's already paid for. We have an RFP going out to get that in place. And then the MDT system, the infrastructure is part of my budget, just the infrastructure, and then the actual software is distributed through the actual agencies that connect to the infrastructure. And MDT is Mobile Data Terminal is the acronym for that. Any questions?
With Commission's consent, I'd like to break for just 2 or 3 minutes.
Hang on, Paul. We'll probably come right back to you, okay?
Sure. I need it right now, since everybody walked out.
Let's go blister.
Okay, you ran us all off, so it's you can continue to do it.
That's what we told him.
Did you? I'm sorry, I had a call I had to take.
Sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
So that ends my presentation. I was talking about the teacher. MDT. So I thank you for your time, sir.
Mayor, while you were gone, we finished Public Works.
I moved to adjourn then.
I second.
I second.
Mayor Art may know what you're talking about. He's tracked that down when you asked about that question about incentives.
Do you have any questions
Elam.
for me?
Anybody have any questions for the comedian of the week?
I'll be here all week.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yes, sir.
You ask about the raise or stipend. That's referring to our Kentucky Law Enforcement Police Programming Fund, CLEF.
That's
yeah, and it's 40 hours in service. Kentucky mandates that all certified officers continue their training. So every year we attend 40-hour in service, and for that, the state rewards us with a total of $4,000 a year.
Total or per person?
Per person, yes.
Okay, so I wasn't crazy?
Which is an increase.
No, I'm crazy.
Over the last 15 years, it was $3,100, but this current administration.
And we're doing that, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
I wasn't probably included in all this, though, was it? 4,000 extra.
If you're happy, we've completed the first public safety department. We'll now move to the second one, fire department with Chief Steve Mitchell.
Thank you, City Manager. Steve Mitchell, Fire Chief. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm pleased to provide the Fire Department budget brief this afternoon. The Owensboro Fire Department provides emergency and community risk reduction services for the citizens, workforce, and visitors of the City of Owensboro. We respond to over 8,000 emergency incidents and conduct over 2,000 fire safety inspections a year. The department consists of 99 uniformed personnel, 1 civilian administrative support staff member, and 2 part-time fire safety specialists. There are no new positions in the 18-19 budget proposal, and a former assistant chief position has been realigned to a battalion chief rank in this proposal. The Owensboro Fire Department has EMS programs, our community risk reduction programs, and our fire suppression programs. And I just wanted to point out, in the current fiscal year, since July 1, we have saved an estimated $2.9 million in property by quickly mitigating fires that have occurred thanks to our extensive training and quick response, and many of these properties have since returned to normal use. Our budget's located in the general fund, and you can find it in your yellow tab number 10. The budget proposed for the fire department for fiscal year 18-19 was mostly outlined as a multi-year plan during the 17-18 budget process. This year, I'm pleased to present a budget that contains features of multi-year plan to include high level of emergency operations, improvement in our personal protective equipment, continuation of our successful professional development programs, the next implementation stage of our firefighter occupational cancer prevention program, and keeping it up with the expansion of the east side of the city as discussed in our comprehensive resource deployment study last year. Our overall budget of $11,682,339 is a 15% increase over the current year. However, slightly $1.1 million of that amount is combined in the ladder truck and equipment for the east side and the increased obligation in pensions. Now, if you indulge me just a second, Commission, I'd like to remind the audience and those watching at home that in 2016, a comprehensive resource plan analysis updated and presented in 2017 as a part of the multi-year budget process. This study is still available on the Fire Department website, on our Facebook page, and the presentation from April of 2017 is still available on YouTube. The Messenger also had a very good article of it in March 7th of last year that also covered the study. In summary, that study identified that the city of Owensboro had reached its threshold requirement needing a ladder service company and apparatus for the east side of the city. After various presentations, multiple reviews, and considering options, this commission made the decision to move forward with keeping up public safety for the east side of the city the same as the rest of the city across the board. And I get to announce today that recently the Insurance Services Office, who does our insurance rating, applauded this commission's efforts that our ladder service deployment plan would bring us up to a city total of 91%, which is exactly what the study predicted would happen if we move forward with this plan. If you may recall, the current coverage is only 75%, a little less than 75%. So this will do much more than meet our deployment. The apparatus has been designed to respond to fires, medical emergencies, automotive, and special rescue situations, so we will get more bang for our buck out of this apparatus. You may recall from last year that the new apparatus purchase is an addition to the fleet and must come from the general fund as opposed to the replacement fund. After the purchase, it will then move into the normal replacement fund. After your approval of this plan last year, the process moved forward. The truck was designed, it has been ordered, and is in the build phase, but will not be delivered until this fall. That's the reason you're seeing it in the 18-19 budget instead of the 17-18 budget. It had to be carried over. Also with this unit, since this is a brand new unit, we have to fully equipment. We do not have the equipment in stock. So that bid will go out in the midsummer. Mayor and Commission, you know, notice that the budget boasts a decrease in maintenance costs of 9%. This is because we had projects that were completed this year and we no longer have to worry about those projects. The personnel cost reflects an overall 8% increase, but a majority of that is in the pension increase and increase in health insurance. Our younger firefighters are starting families, and thus their insurance responsibilities are increasing. If you take away those, our across-the-board personnel line items are only about a 3% increase. On the slide, I've pointed out the overall supplies budget increase of 10%, or $29,151. $14,000 of this, or nearly half, is because diesel costs have once again increased on us. So that's half of that increase. While we've presented decrease in some line items, we do have overall increases due to the replacement cycle of some of our hazardous materials, special rescue response, monitors, and our AED replacement, which is the AED is our defib units we use for heart attacks. Unfortunately, ours have approached the end of useful life, and we have to start replacing those in 1819. And that'll be a 3-year cycle. We'll replace them all over a 3-year period. Within our capital equipment, we're requesting some of the funds be available for the personal protective equipment purchase for our body armor in case that grant application is not successful. It is not the full funding amount, but that'll at least get us a start until we are able to seek other funding alternatives. Other than the ladder truck expansion, there's a couple things I want to point out. One thing is, as fire chief, it's my goal to do everything possible to reduce the risk of firefighter occupational cancer. That is, some of the stuff we budgeted this year includes new filtered hoods that keep the particulates off the face and necks of our firefighters, new decontamination processes that will happen at the fire scene and of our fire apparatus. We will also participate in WKU research project testing for carcinogens on our personnel and at our stations at no cost to the city. We are also seeking funds for grain bin and confined space rescue equipment due to the Owensboro grain expansion. While some of that funding is included in this proposal, we are also helping for private-public partnership to help us complete this project. And lastly, under the fleet replacement plan, which is run by Wayne Shelton, there is a replacement of a fire department pumper apparatus in 1819. We were able to extend the life of this unit and one other unit 2 years, which actually saved us money in the replacement plan. That's my brief, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, you mentioned that our ISO rating went from 71 or 76 to 91?
That was the coverage. So within the ISO rating, one of the things is the distribution or deployment, which was what that study was all about. So we had under the NFPA 1710, which is the standard that ISO goes by, we were running about 75% coverage, which is what that deployment showed. And for the ladder truck portion of it, once this unit goes in service this fall, we will be up to 91%, which is the goal. And that's exactly where the recommendation said we would be, was like 90.9.
For the average person, average guy that's paying their homeowner's insurance, what does that mean to them?
So that means we're going to be able to reach 90% of our jurisdiction within the city in 5 minutes or less.
Does that influence insurance rates at all?
It will. Our since they have included this in our audit, we expect to stay at Class 2 instead of the possibility of dropping to a Class 3 that we were looking at previously.
And then last thing, we had I believe we had another ladder truck, the old one. Whatever happened with it?
Yeah, so the ladder one that got replaced a year ago, it's almost been 2 years ago now, it was sold for $25,000 to a place in Akron, Ohio.
Where'd that money go?
Into the replacement fund.
Replacement fund?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
So the new protocol where our EMT folks will go in, let's say there's a shooting at a school, God forbid that ever happens, but they're now wanting them to be able to go in and actually treat the victims with, sheriff's deputies around them to protect them, and they're going to have these vests and all these. Have you begun the training and protocol involved to be able to do that? I mean, are you able to do that now, or will that be a future skill that you'll have?
We have 2 people that went away to school and are certified and can start training the others. And the way that works is the police officers go in, and as they clear areas, so they clear a room, then we go in behind them and actually start treating victims instead of waiting for them to clear the entire building.
Yeah, WFIE did an excellent coverage of that with our local, I think it was our local folks, it may have been Owensboro, and it struck me how both departments have to work together to make this work. They've got to protect your folks, and you've got to know what they're doing as well. So we've got 2 that are being trained. That's good. And where's the cost being picked up for that? Do we have a grant or?
No, to train those two, we picked that up out of our normal training budget, but they'll be able to train everybody else internally.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor.
Anybody else? Thank you, Chief.
Mayor, Commissioners, that completes our second public safety organization. We'll now turn to Director of Parks and Recreation for her brief, Amanda Rogers.
Thank you, City Manager Parrish. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm pleased to be here to tell you a little bit more about the Parks and Recreation proposed budget for next year. As you can see on that slide, it represents your Parks and Recreation team. I'm going to be briefing from the yellow tab 11 in your budget books, if you want to follow along. That team is 178 employees strong. We operate primarily out of two funds, your enterprise fund and your general fund. And when you look at that slide, everything that's in yellow is from your Parks General Fund, and everything that's in blue is your Enterprise Recreation Fund. This team is responsible for over 960 acres, or 27 locations. Those locations host hundreds of amenities from 36 sports fields, over 32 miles of trails, 15 shelters, pavilions, 14 playgrounds. We manage 21 annual or long-term facility use agreements. We rent to more than 550 individuals a year. We help nearly 9,000 youth participate in sports, programs, tournaments, and leagues a year. And we help support your local economy through sports and recreation tourism. We manage these locations within the two funds we discussed, and to start, we'll go to parks. That budget operates primarily all your green space parks and general programming. There's 26 separate locations that are funded through this side of my budget in the general fund. Those are locations like your Atkinson Greenbelt Park, Legion, Moreland, English, Thompson-Berry Soccer Complex, and many others. Our expenditures are about $3.5 million, which is holding steady from the previous year. Our personnel costs increased 7% for reasons Bill previously covered, in addition for retirement contingency. Our maintenance costs decreased about 3%, which is generally project-based. If you'll remember last year, we did significant work at the Moreland Park tennis courts. Not having that project has decreased that portion of my budget as well. Our utilities have increased about 10%, primarily due to rate increases and increased usage at Smothers Park as well. And we have capital areas that have increased 3%, or about $16,000, and that's due to some changing in the values within the replacement plan and how we change the life cycle of some items within that plan. Now we'll go to my Recreation Enterprise Fund. That covers 7 enterprise divisions, both of our pools, both golf courses, the Edge Ice Center, the softball complex, and the center court tennis facility. Those expenditures about $3.2 million, which is up 16% from the previous year. Our increases in personnel are primarily due to retirement costs. We have a retirement contingency that's covered in this area as well. And with aging equipment, running a park system, there's many pieces of equipment. We have increased small engine repair work. Our maintenance area is up 11%. That's primarily due to some repairs in our irrigation systems at both of our golf courses. Also, some turbine pump repairs that are needed for those systems. We have 2 small projects in addition, one at Hillcrest for painting and one at the softball complex upstairs, carpet replacement. Our capital expenses are up 108%. That's close to $400,000 for projects at Ben Halls Park and golf course. Now, if you look at the Parks and Recreation system for next year, I want to highlight 4 projects that will occur. We will be replacing the playground at Chautauqua Park. That's funded through our replacement plan, where we've been setting aside a small amount of dollars each year so that we can replace that playground. It was installed 14 years ago, and we have about $150,000 set aside to replace that playground next year. We're also going to be replacing and doing tee box repairs. We've been doing this ongoing since we've taken over operation of Ben Halls Golf Course. We'll be doing repairs to tees 13, 14, and 16 next year in the budget. We're also looking to make significant repairs and or replacement of the maintenance building at Ben Halls. We've budgeted for replacement, and we hope that we can do less than replacement and just make significant repairs to get that to where we need that building where we need it to be operationally. And we're going to add an indoor adult soccer league. We've seen great success with our public-private partnership at our street soccer court at Legion Park, and due to that success and the overwhelming request of those people that participate at that location, we're going to add that league this upcoming winter.
Where's that going to be played?
in our office, in our admin center gym. Mayor and Commissioners, that concludes my brief today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. If not, I will turn it back over to City Manager Bill Parrish.
Next up will be Wayne Shelton, Mayor, with the Public Works briefs.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Public Works operates under the guidance of a Public Works Director. It's comprised of two distinct areas, engineering and operations. Engineering is under the direction of City Engineer Kevin Collian, supported by Assistant City Engineer Dirk Duper. Presentation of the Engineering Department budget will be undertaken by the City Engineer Kevin Collian.
Thank you, Wayne. Kevin Collian, City Engineer. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. You can follow along on tab 13 if you like. The Engineering Department is a general fund department budget. It is an organization comprised of 10 full-time employees. We oversee or have jurisdiction over just about any activity in the right-of-way. That includes storm sewers, streets, sidewalks. We perform plan review for development projects, annexations, right-of-way closures, encroachments permits, boundary and route surveying, and provide capital project management for capital projects. This year's budget is up 4%. Personnel costs are up 6% due to health insurance and retirement costs. There's also $9,600 budgeted for non-full-time to perform sidewalk inspections in accordance with the city's sidewalk ordinance. Maintenance costs are up 4%. That's primarily due to street paving, and that is to maintain a 30-year paving cycle. Next year's task will primarily consist of a continuing maintenance on streets, sidewalks, storm sewers, construction of the Greenbelt East Trail, and completion of the parking garage. I'll take any questions that you have.
Glenn, real quick one. So this year with our street and sidewalk repair plan, it always seems, you hear this anecdotally from residents, that a lot of the work is on the west side. It's in the Apollo area. It's in that area. Are we working mainly on the west side this year, or do we have other major projects that are going to come up that will be on more on the central or eastern side of the community?
It's our paving is divided into 3 districts. We have the north, and then the southeast and the southwest. We usually kind of try to spread the wealth. However, some of our more major streets are kind of in the north with 2nd and 4th, which we've been kind of working on each year. So we try to spread it around, but it just depends on the need, really. You know, the type of street, the condition that it's in, the traffic it gets, and all that comes into play.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. There have been in Frankfurt, I suppose, some discussions concerning the road fund formula and how that's calculated or not, and I believe that it had been adjusted. But from the city's perspective, in regards to the whole, road fund formula, do we really get a significant amount of money from the state? And relate that to what the county gets for their roads, if you could, if any.
You know, the finance department can give you the actual numbers, but when you look at the overall general picture of the county, I was going to say, gets the lion's share of the funding from the state government. That's I guess the politics of the situation. You know, even though a city street may cost 3 times as much as a county road to pave, that the lion's share of the funding does go to back to the county.
Do you have those numbers, Angela? Would you have them, please?
I do have what our municipal aid revenue number is.
Yes, ma'am.
And I actually got it straight from KLC because they do that allocation for us. It's $1,144,981. And that's about a $25,000 increase over 17-18. And a lot of that calculation is based on mileage. Of course, the county has a lot more miles than what we have contained here in the city. So that does come into play too as part of the formula.
Could you state that number just a little slower?
Sure. $1,144,981. Yeah, you can find that on page 1A. It's behind the revenue summary tab in the budget book.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
I want to congratulate Wayne, too, because I called him one day and said we were making a case for House Bill 151 to try and figure out how we could take our share or get our share of the road money. And he put together a tremendous brief or whatever you guys want to call it, and I sent it to KLC, and they said that probably the best description of how this road fund should be used. And although the bill didn't pass, you know, at least we have a foot in the door for next year, and I want to thank you for that because that was a big help. Because it is true that, you know, they got 460 miles in the county, we got 16.5 miles in the city, so it's just based on linear mile, and it's a rural government, it's a rural, rural thinking in Frankfurt, and KCO's stronger than KLC. So, but thanks, Wayne, that was a big help. Anything else? City manager.
Wayne's still up here.
Oh, Wayne's still in the hot seat?
The operations side of Public Works is comprised of 7 departments, each department unique unto themselves, working in cooperation and support of one another. With me here today are the department managers, street, stormwater, ditch crews, street manager Kevin DeRosset, facilities maintenance, building department manager Jeff Tone, grounds department manager Adam Wright, sanitation department acting manager Ronnie Ferguson, fleet garage manager James Mattingly, transit manager Pamela Canary. I'll be briefing the street department slide, which can be found yellow tab number 14. Street department is part of the general fund. Street department activity includes the repair and maintenance of streets and alleys, pre-paving, street repairs and preparation, street reconstruction, installation, repair and maintenance, curb, gutter repair, painting, street debris removal, clearing, storm and snow response to include brine manufacturing application, and special event support. The department is staffed by 17 full-time employees with shared administrative staff. No increase in staffing is included in this budget. The total budget and goal at the top of the page is just over $2.2 million, which is a decrease of 2% or $51,000. Decrease is accounted for primarily in 4 areas. Personnel costs are up by $111,000, and as in all departments, is driven by salaries, retirement, and health care costs. Maintenance costs are down $21,000 due to the rollover of funds from the previous year. Supplies costs have decreased $73,000 based on inventory levels, salt quantity stockpiled, and having completed the re-signing and pavement markings for rollover crossings this fiscal year. Capital expenditures are down some $67,000 based on the extension of the planned life cycle for selected equipment and vehicles and completion of the replacement of the brine storage tanks. Street paving, maintenance, and repair operations can be found in both the engineering and street department budgets. The infrastructure allocations requested could be classified as a continuation budget and that it maintains the current level of activity through the coming fiscal year. In comparing the two fiscal year columns for expenditures, one will note that totals are comparable when factoring in the cost of materials inflation. It is anticipated that mileage paved this fiscal year, which when completed at the end of June will equate to about 7.5 miles, should equate to a similar mileage projected to be completed in the 18-19 fiscal year. If we use 225 miles of street, divide that by 7.5 miles paved a year, then this places us at about a 30-year paving cycle on our streets. No questions here. I'll move to the Stormwater Department. The Stormwater Department slide can be found at yellow tab number 15. The Stormwater Department, which we also call the ditch crew, is part of the special revenue fund from your community vision. This department is responsible for maintenance of ditches throughout the city, inspection, mowing, mucking, debris removal, and repair. In addition, they perform basin mowing and maintenance, inlet clearing, right-of-way mowing along ditches and roadways. They assist with winter operations, snow clearing, and brine application, storm response, and special event support. The department is staffed by three full-time employees with seasonal support for mowing, tractor, bush hog operators. No increase in staffing is included in this budget. Total budget and go to the top of the page is just at $392,000, which is a decrease of 26%, or $134,000. This decrease is accounted for primarily in three areas. Personnel costs are up by some $7,000, and as a repeat driven by retirement salaries, healthcare costs. Our other costs are down $81,000 due to rollover of funds from the previous year and the fact that we do in-house spraying of ditches versus contractors. Capital expenditures are down some $62,000 due to reassignment of a vehicle from another department in lieu of purchasing a new vehicle, extended life cycles of selected vehicles and equipment. No questions here. I'll move to property maintenance. Property maintenance department slide can be found at yellow tab number 16. Property maintenance department is part of the general fund with a 20% allocation for inspector support from the sanitation department. This department inspects and enforces the property maintenance codes through the property maintenance ordinance as it relates to tall grass and weeds, trash, debris, building maintenance, interior and exterior. In addition, they enforce the sanitation ordinance related to trash and debris collection requirements. The department is staffed by 2 full-time and 2 part-time employees. No increase in staffing is included in this budget. Total budget, and go to the top of the page, just over $221,000. It's an increase of 9%, or $17,500. Increase is accounted for primarily in 3 areas. Personnel costs are up approximately $37,000, and as all departments driven by salaries, retirement, and health care costs. This year we also have the full funding for the second full-time property maintenance inspector. Supply costs are up $7,200 due to IT costs associated with 3 tablets to facilitate inspection process for NOVs and citations. An additional $2,000 for lien filing cost to try to recover contractor services costs, fines, and penalties. Capital expenditures are down some $28,000 due to budgeting and purchase of new vehicle this fiscal year and extending life cycle of an existing vehicle. No questions, and I'll move on to facilities maintenance.
Mr. Condor?
Thank you, Mayor. Wayne, Just curious, how much money are we allocated, for example, to actually take down buildings that are just dilapidated or condemned and do all of the cleanup work just to get everything to look decent? Does that come from this budget, or where, and how much is that, please?
All right, the demolition account can be found in the engineering budget, and it's budgeted for $50,000.
And that will take 4, maybe 3?
Actually, an average, say, a single-story home with asbestos remediation, it was a neighborhood of about $5,500, so you can do about a neighborhood of 8 to 9 houses a year.
It seems like sometimes you just need about $100,000 then to take down some of the houses faster, is what you need, because we have so many more that are dilapidated homes. We really do. Okay. Hang on.
Facilities maintenance,
Hang on just a minute.
Sorry.
Commissioner Glenn has one question.
Yeah, I wanted to bundle these real quick. So we're getting a second inspector position to work with Joe Sublett, and that person will go online when?
well, the second inspector position was approved in last year's budget.
Right.
We've been interviewing and trying to recruit individuals with the, I'm going to say, the attitude and demeanor that is necessary to perform that function. We've recently replaced our part-time inspector. The previous one had resigned, retired. We brought that on board this past week. So, you know, hopefully in the coming months we'll be able to fulfill that recruitment, to fill that second position.
Yeah, I think that's greatly needed. I don't know how Joe's done it alone all these years, so I'm glad to see that's going to happen. So, the other quick question I have is all the work we've done for sewage, flood control in the fairgrounds area. Anecdotally, from the constituents I talk to, that work seems to have really paid off. We don't have, even the rain we're having today, we're not having the kind of complaints we used to have. Has that been your experience? Has been that generally the flood control projects that have been initiated are making a difference?
Yes, sir. Any time that you provide areas to retain and hold additional water, then it has to make a benefit. That area in particular, I believe, has used to be every rain event we were called in that area, and it's been several years since I've been called to come to that area.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of those folks had raw sewage in their homes if they got a heavy enough flooding, pooling rain. So, okay, appreciate your work. Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. God bless.
Facilities maintenance budget, buildings and grounds, will be presented by Deputy Director Stephen Franklin.
Mayor, Commissioners, Stephen Franklin, Deputy Director of Public Works. Today I will be briefing you on facility maintenance, which can be found on Yellow Tab 17. Facility maintenance is an internal service fund that consists of 2 departments. You have buildings and you have grounds. Facility maintenance is responsible for maintaining public facilities and parks, as well as assisting in festivals, special events, severe weather cleanup. The department is staffed with 23 full-time personnel and 9 seasonal temps. All full-time personnel are required to hold a CDL license and to help in winter weather operations. This year's total budget is $3.4 million, which is down 13% from last year due to 5 key factors. First being personnel, due to the common theme previously discussed. Second is maintenance. Maintenance is up primarily due to an increase in maintenance projects and timing of these projects. Supplies is down $1,400 due to rollover of stock from current inventory. Other is down 24% due to rollover funds from prior year. Capital is down 86% primarily due to repairing Moreland Park tennis courts plank surface the prior year, as well as reducing the replacement cost of vehicles and equipment by extending them out. If there's no questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Wayne.
Real quick.
Mr. Glenn.
The damage that we had to the park, I know they did a great job preparing the park for the flood that came up. In terms of the cost to your department, did that put us in the hole or cost you a high amount of money? Because I know the county was not recognized as a county in need after the flooding. The state didn't designate us a disaster zone, so we couldn't get reimbursed for some of that. Did you incur additional costs, or were we able to absorb it in our budget?
We were able to absorb it. Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Shelton.
You know, I would like to make a comment and thank the Davis County Jailer, because he did loan us some few folks to help down at Smothers Park, and they revisited English Park on several occasions. So I would like to, you know, to note that.
Good to hear. Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. Garage.
I'll be briefing the Fleet Garage Department slide, which can be found at yellow tab number 18. The Fleet Garage is part of the Internal Service Fund operations. The department performs routine preventative service, maintenance, and repairs of all city fleet vehicles, construction equipment, small equipment, gas or diesel fueled. The department is staffed by 8 full-time employees, and no increase in staffing is included in this budget. Total budget, and go to the top of the page, just over $1,360,000. This is an increase of 5% or $59,000. This increase is accounted for in primarily 3 areas. Personnel costs are up by approximately $64,000. Salaries, retirement, health care, repetitive impacts. Supply costs were at $15,000 due to the cost of parts, basically inflation. Capital expenditures are down some $15,000 due to extending the life cycle of a service truck and economizing of a second vehicle due to be replaced. And we also purchased an analytical scan tool this past year.
What was that?
An analytical scan tool, basically a computer analyzer for evaluating what's wrong, reading codes on vehicles.
Thank you. That question: how do you make an assumption that you're going to have a 78% increase in salary overtime? What's this? How do you look at that assumption? Make an assumption that there's going to be 78% increase. Am I reading that wrong? Change, last line, garage, salaries, overtime, 78%?
Correct, Mayor, $2,850 or 78.
I mean, it's not a big number. I'm just curious, from the assumption side, what do you use to quantify that?
Do you have a turnover this year in a mechanic?
I think we had some new hire. I think this past year, I believe so, didn't we, Jim? I think we had one new hire. When you have a new hire and then you replace an older mechanic, then that does influence the percentages.
Okay, just kind of look oddball.
No other questions in the garage. We'll move on to sanitation.
Mayor, if I could, when you asked about the 78% increase, if you refer back to that page, on the actual amount for year-to-date February, you'll see that they've got year-to-date actuals of 5,000. So I think the budget based on for 18-19 is based on what they are experiencing this fiscal year.
Actual spending vice, what we said a year ago we thought.
Certainly, yes.
I'm just asking the assumption. How do you figure that out, that it's 78, not 79, or not 76? Just curious.
Art and science.
Art and science, and hoorah! Thank you.
The sanitation department slide can be found at yellow tab number 19.
Whitney.
Sanitation is an enterprise fund that is wholly supported by customer fees or charges. This department provides residential trash, yard waste, seasonal leaf collections, special collections and cleanouts, street sweeping, operates the recycle drop-off center, commercial dumpster service, special event support, maintains the closed city landfill, as well as provide for snow operation support services, disaster response, and cleanup operations. Staffed by 25 full-time, one part-time employee, and shared administrative employees, and also utilize property maintenance inspectors and sanitation inspectors. No increase in staffing is included in this budget. Total budget at the top of the page in gold is just over $7,360,000, which is an increase of 4% or nearly $300,000. Increase is accounted for primarily in 5 areas. Personnel costs are up by $114,000, as in all departments, driven by salaries, retirement, healthcare costs. Maintenance costs are up $21,000, reflecting an increase in the garage cost of performing maintenance, as well as an increase in the cost of parts used to perform those repairs. Supplies costs have increased $111,000. With anticipated increases in fuel costs, additional trash cans for downtown core area, additional toter order to address growth and developments, such as Bluegrass Commons, Keeneland expansion, and Central Park construction. Additional dumpsters are also included to address the growth in 54 Corridor and Gateway Commons area. Other cost categories have increased some 4% or $107,000, reflecting an increase in street sweeping costs, providing for a Talks Away Day, landfill maintenance repairs, tipping fee increase potential, and an increase in management fee support for services. Capital expenditures are down some $56,000 based on scheduled equipment, vehicle replacement cycles. No questions?
Sorry. I'm at the health park at 4:45, 4:30, and there's a damn dumpster truck over there slamming those dumpsters. And I'm just wondering how in the world, I know there's got to be some reason, but I mean, you can't believe how loud it is over there when that dumpster guy's banging that stuff in there. It doesn't sound like anything's in it because it sounds hollow, but why are we making that racket at 4:30 in the morning?
Well, you know, we get up early, so we like everyone else to be
You're
up
doing
early.
it, baby. You got it. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, nobody ever complains about that?
No, occasionally we do get complaints about the times of emptying dumpsters, but you know, if you've ever had the opportunity to ride in an overhead truck to go empty dumpsters, then you'll see that it's a very challenging task to try to pull into,
especially in the dark at 4:30. I could see how it would be.
But the traffic is what makes it the challenge. You know, 4:30. If it's a little early, then we can adjust that an extra. 15 minutes maybe.
If they're not complaining, I just don't understand the logic behind it. Just because it's
what happens,
traffic.
Mayor, is it's driven by parking and parking lots. And what happens is later in the day, a lot of the parking lots are full, and the truck can't get to where the dumpster is because the owner of the property doesn't have enough room to have parking and dumpster service. So we have to go in early in the morning. What will happen on occasion, someone will call and say, hey, I work nights, it's my only chance to sleep. We'll try to adjust the routes, but we rob Peter to pay Paul because we move it from that neighborhood because that's the only time we can get that dumpster. We move it over to another neighborhood. There are a lot of cities around the country that have 24-hour sanitation service. You get to some of the larger cities, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. We hate doing it, but sometimes the only way we can get in to get a dumpster.
Okay.
A quick question. Do we have any trucks that are going to need to be replaced? I know we've cut down on personnel with the arms that pick up so you really only need one person. And I want to defend the sanitation folks also. Cities throughout the country do early pickups, and one reason is businesses don't want them around when they're open either. So when I've ridden with these guys, they're out there at 4 in the morning because they don't want to be there when the business is open. They want their trash picked up and out of the way, and they do a great job. The guys I've ridden with do an awesome job. So just want to commend our sanitation folks. But the question is equipment. Are we going to have to replace any of the trucks in the next year or two?
Yes, sir. We have a scheduled replacement plan for all of our equipment and vehicles. So each year, different vehicles will roll up for replacement. I think this year we do have a couple of sidearm trucks and another front-end loader that we'll be purchasing, I think along with some chippers, I believe. So instead of trying to replace them all in 1 year or having them all lump sum and impact the budget all at once, then they're spread out over a period of years. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Commissioner Condor.
Thank you, Mayor. Wayne, the sanitation fund seems to continually operate very well financially. It just operates on its own and in the black is what it continues to do. But yet, whenever you're increasing $300,000, that's not coming necessarily out of the general fund or any other tax. That's just a standalone entity going to be absorbed by that fund. So do you need to raise rates?
Everything that sanitation spends comes from the sanitation department and sanitation revenue. It gets no general funding or any other funding from outside sources. We do get a litter abatement grant to where we pick up trash along the streets and roads that we will receive from the state in the neighborhood of like $27,000 a year. Some of the costs that you see are for the growth potential cost, like when you buy extra toters. That's really because you're anticipating new and additional customers to come on board. So you have the Bluegrass Commons areas that'll be coming online. Keeneland Trace is developing, I think, 2 to 3 more of their units. There's a little development there off of Old Hartford Road, I think called Central Park, that will be coming online. And a lot of these are what I call family locations. They may have 1 or 2 toters. And the other thing is, keep in mind, any money that is budgeted for sanitation rolls back into the sanitation fund. So even though we may budget an extra $40,000 for toters, if those toters are seen not to be necessary or needed, then the money won't be spent. The money returns back to the sanitation account.
And to your point, Commissioner Glenn, I'm not bad-mouthing the sanitation people. I am just strictly making a point that there are no businesses over there behind the health park, around Mayfair Square, and they're dumping the trash at 4:30 in the morning. So I'm not bad-mouthing
Point
the
taken.
sanitation department. I think they come to my place. I don't want them not dumping my dumpster. But just to make myself clear.
To kind of expand on that,
Sure.
I'll say we're thrifty, to facilitate more pickups at a later time means we have to add more personnel, more equipment. So we try to maximize to get extend that equipment to.
That's what I told them. I said,
almost push the limits.
We're short on staff. We got to do it when we can.
Right.
Still loud. Real loud. Okay. What's next?
If there's no other questions with transit, sanitation, I'll turn it over to Stephen for.
Mayor, Commissioners, I will be briefing Transit Department, which can be found on Yellow Tab 20. Transit Department is an enterprise fund who also receives funds from the general fund, federal funds, and state funds. It consists of 2 different budgets, first being admin, second being capital. Admin is a 50-50 split, 50% federal funds, 50% local funds. Capital is a 80-10-10 split, 80% federal, 10% state, and 10% local funds. OTS provides mass transit to the city through 8 fixed routes, 1 downtown trolley, and ADA paratransit. The department is staffed with 20 full-time personnel, 11 part-time personnel. Currently, we have 3 openings for full-time personnel and 9 openings for part-time. There are no increases to staffing in this year's budget. This year's total budget, which includes federal and state funds, is $2.6 million, which is up 6% primarily due to 4 key factors. First being personnel, due to the common thing we've previously discussed. Second being maintenance. Maintenance is up 3% primarily due to the maintenance requirements of an aging fleet. Supplies is down $12,000 due to current inventory on shelf and the ability to extend the useful life of small tools which are currently in good working condition. Capital is down 18% due to the fact there are no major building repairs or maintenance required in this year. No further questions. Hand it off to Bill.
Mayor,
Can we just say thank you, Dwayne? You got a lot on your plate, man. It's pretty impressive. Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, that completes the departments. I'll now turn to yellow tab 21, which is general government. These are parts of the budget that don't fit neatly into any department. This is part of the general fund. The budget is $10.4 million, and for this year, that budget is down over $250,000 by $270,000. And that's because the rec transfers are up by $500,000, call that the subsidy. There's an increase in capital of $285,000 for either major work or replacement of the cart shed at Ben Hawes, for repair of 6 walking or cart bridges at the golf course at Ben Hawes, and for lower revenues. You remember this year we had a horribly wet year. This reduces revenues at all the rec facilities, but primarily focused on the golf courses by $93,000. We're looking for that happy balance between a dry year or wet year to see where we're at. You'll see also the general fund retirement contingency is up $100,000. That's the payout when someone retires for half of their sick pay, the remaining vacation, etc. That is because in 17 and 18, the current year, we projected 13 retirements and funded that to an 80% level. We expect 20 retirements this year, funded to a 60% level. Now that's balanced by those increases by a reduction of $745,000, primarily driven because our records management system at OPD is in the process of being completed. Last year's 7 new OPD police cars for those 7 new officers that we paid for out of general government, those have been purchased, and the Fisher Park expansion that we paid into your community vision, reduced by $500,000. Nate Pagan will continue that discussion about Fisher Park as part of the next series, Your Community Vision. If you have no discussion about general government, Nate will pick that up at tab 22 for Your Community Vision.
Thank you, Bill. Your Community Vision Fund is a special revenue fund with revenue from the .33 or 33 basis points of the net profit and occupational taxes. The ordinance enacting the .33 called for the proceeds to be put in a capital project and stormwater drainage fund, which we refer to as Your Community Vision. Consistent with that original intent, if you look at the allocations on the screen, the biggest bulk of funding is for stormwater projects. A portion of that, the biggest portion, is for debt service, for KIA loans taken out over the last few years for the large projects that have been undertaken by the city. That also includes the stormwater crew or ditch crew that Wayne referenced earlier, outsourced projects, and projects in partnership with RWRA. If you notice the top line, it says allocations. So this fund is a little bit different, and it's not the same as an expenditure. So we allocate funds or appropriate funds for projects for future years. One thing that makes your community vision.
Excuse me? They won't give you a computer.
Saving money, Mayor.
Signals, smoke signals. One thing that makes the Your Community Vision Fund a little different is it's not a balanced fund. So the revenues coming in do not always equal the expenditures or the appropriations or allocations made every year. So in this way, the fund functions very similar to a depreciation reserve fund, in that we put back future funds for future projects. Thank you. An example of this is for our pools. The Commission in the past has indicated support for providing aquatic recreation to the community. Luckily, at startup this year, there were no major problems for our pools, but we know that our current facilities are very old. So in the current budget, the 17-18 budget, we included $200,000 in the YCV fund, and we're including an additional $350,000 in the 18-19 Your Community Vision Fund to start allocating toward future repair or replacement of our aquatic facilities. We know it's coming, we know it will be expensive, and so we are trying to have money in place for when that occurs. Yes, sir.
Isn't the move, maybe it's Amanda question, isn't there a huge move to get away from these flat pools all across everywhere? I mean,
There
What-
is, and Amanda, please jump up, but.
I didn't mean to talk
No,
past you.
No, that's what we're here for.
No, Mayor, you're exactly correct. What we're seeing nationally and even here in the state of Kentucky is we're moving to family aquatic centers, which are a combination of minimal flat water, zero depth entry, and aquatic play features. So you see lazy rivers, you see dumping buckets, you see all those things you would typically see at a commercial pool, and those help to drive revenues and manage and offset that subsidy.
So where are we on that thought process?
Well, if you're asking my personal opinion, I would say the point at which...
You'll give it to me. I know you will.
I
agree.
will, honestly, yes, sir. I would say that what would make the most sense financially for our community, if you all desire for us to continue into providing aquatic facilities for our citizens, is that the point at which one of our pools decides that it no longer wants to operate, then at that point, instead of putting additional funds into that location, my primary concern is Craven's Pool. The state pool director has been here as recent as 2 years ago and given us a report at that time that said you're not to code. So when in this pool has significant work that needs to be done, you will need to get to code. In and of that process itself, it's automatically about $300,000 right off the top to get to code. So that would be my point, is I think that if you all want to continue to provide aquatic facilities, we should look at a family-style aquatic center, which will be much more expensive, and that we would take that money that we are setting aside here to come up with that design and that plan as we move forward.
So are you setting money aside for that thought process?
That is what this attempts to do. Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Smith-Wright?
Yes. We're saying our pools. Now, I thought the school board owned Craven's Pool. What's up with that?
Go ahead, maybe jump in there, City Manager.
They own the ground, they own the pool, but they will not operate the pool. I've met with the superintendent, and I've met with their attorney, and they will not operate the pool. They won't contribute to operating the pool. Their answer is, it's yours, you've always operated, it's yours for operations.
Much less fix the concession stand and the restrooms and all the other things that go along with the pool. So, but it's coming. That's why I was wondering about this 350, if we're sticking something away for a rainy day on that.
Exactly right.
So that's a total of 350. It's not an additive of 200.
No, it's additive. So that would be 550 at this point, and then again, expect future allocations going forward.
Yeah.
And when you said, Amanda, that it was more expensive, you mean the startup or the maintenance? Both. Okay. Ugh. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The commission has expressed that bridge lighting is a priority, so we're proposing to allocate $452,000 to go along with the carryover allocation from this year for a total project of $750,000 for replacing lighting on the Blue Bridge. This amount is based on updating estimates from a January 2015 engineering report. This project will be reimbursed by the downtown TIF, so we would expend the dollars if approved initially and then reimburse ourselves as revenues grow in the downtown TIF district.
Do you have, I better not say that. When you say lighting, are you just broadly talking lighting? Are you talking red, white, and blue? Are you talking
That's a
Shot
good
John? Or?
So the report from the engineering firm basically had three options.
Okay, all right.
And we took the highest end option and have extrapolated that amount forward for inflation and for construction costs. So we do have, Kevin has the details with the report with him, but it is the higher end option that we've assumed.
Okay, Smiley, go.
Yes, Mayor, I think that there's room in that number for some different options with some color and stuff like that, but until we get into some detailed design and then more specific options, then we can know exactly. But I think there's some room there for some colors and stuff like that.
Okay, and the TIF contribution, is that a set specific amount?
Well, that is to be determined.
Thanks,
when we
Kevin.
get closer to that time frame, staff will come to the commission to see what your wishes are as far as distribution from the TIF fund. If you want it to go 100% to reimbursement for debt service on the parking garage, or if you want to allocate it out, it's going to depend. But we look to have TIF funds in 3 to 5 years to start reimbursing back.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
That's a follow-up to what you said.
Mhm.
And this may be a Steve Lynn question or a Bill question. So where are we at with the state in regard to being allowed to do this? Because I think this is a wonderful project, and I know the mayor is behind it, but where are we at? Are we still waiting on them?
We're still waiting. Our city attorney phoned this morning, again, to Texas to try to find out if there's any progress, and there is none. The state says we are free as soon as the Texas probate court says, yes, you can proceed, this is a valid deal.
Or if we release them from any indemnity, is that the right word, Steve? We release the state from, so who wants to do that? No. Do you have something to add, sir?
Mayor, Commissioners, I would add just a little bit on that. I did this morning speak to James Soto, who is an attorney in Harris County, Texas. He is the guardian ad litem that has been appointed to look after the best interest of Mr. Gonzalez's children. Spoke with him, had a good conversation. He was not at liberty to provide much information to me until he has talked to the local attorney here that represented Mr. Gonzalez's estate. But I do expect to hear back from him possibly within a few days, a week, something to that sort as to how much longer it will take before that estate is ultimately settled, and so that the city.
Who is the local attorney here?
Michelle Cecil, I think, is the name of the local attorney here that filed suit on behalf of Mr. Gonzalez and his estate. But did have a conversation. Just want to let you all know and update you that we are hopefully going to see an end to this someday.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith-Wright.
Yes. If the TIF pays for the lighting of the bridge, what do we do with the money that people donated when they were paying their taxes?
That will help offset other expenses in the general fund.
We'd essentially use it for
Yeah,
the bridge
you'd
lighting.
use it for bridge
And
lighting.
deduct that amount, and in those areas that the commission desires it to go to, for example, more towards pools or to whatever.
Well, you still have to power it on an ongoing basis, no matter what.
Well, there shouldn't be any cost to power it.
Or maintain it.
To maintain it, there'll be cost.
Does that satisfy you, Commissioner Smith-Wright?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that if we use it for something else,
We're going to tell everybody about it.
because we
I put
ask
money in
people,
it too, so.
because we ask people to
That's right.
donate toward the lighting of the bridge, not for something else.
Mayor, if I could, I think the way it would work is if, for example, and we will come back to the commission and ask them what they want in a design, and I think you'll see us bid it as a base design, and then you'll say, but we'd like it to do these things. So alternate A, B, and C, what the additional cost would be.
Okay.
Let's say it comes back at $500,000. The first $7,000 going to pay for that will come from those donations. And then the remainder, the $493,000, will come from the TIF. So that money will go towards bridge lighting. And any additional funds, if we raise more funds by donations, it'll go towards
I mean,
that.
it could help pay for just the design phase.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
I'm
good.
good.
And would still be used to offset or reduce the city's net cost of the project. Now, I know a few of us did have a conversation with Denitra Henderson, who is the new state chief district highway engineer. She confirmed that no work could commence. However, she encouraged us to go ahead and start the design process, so when the legal matters are resolved, we could proceed with construction as soon as possible. Okay, next is a Greenbelt extension utilizing both new and carryover funds for a total of $619,000. This project extends the Greenbelt from Highway 54 by Hucks, utilizing a portion of the old bypass. Across Highway 54 from this project, the developer is completing the last segment to connect the existing Greenbelt along Byers Avenue. This moves us closer to encircling or looping the entire city with the Greenbelt. This project would also be reimbursed by TIF, in this case, the Gateway Commons TIF. So again, we would expend the money on the front end, be reimbursed by future proceeds from development in the area. I believe this project design is complete, and we have the necessary permits from the state transportation cabinets to proceed.
So the 460 is coming from the .33 that as in this year.
That's initially, and then would be reimbursed by TIF proceeds. That's correct.
Okay. One other question. Who on Fairview by the soccer park, where that Greenbelt crosses that road? Is that us or county?
That portion of the Greenbelt is the county's.
They need one of those light things there, man. That's a dangerous spot.
That's a state-maintained road, so I know there's state permission required to put any type of signage
You
up.
know that thing like we got on Old Hartford?
Flashes.
That's bad. It's bad out there. Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Smith, right, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I had someone to just ask me yesterday about that exact same thing, and they were talking about that the kids, you know, that play soccer there, somebody told them that it was when they scheduled the soccer games, and that's high traffic time, and kids are trying to go across the street or do whatever, and it was how dangerous it was. It was just yesterday somebody talked to me about it.
When they park those cars in that parking lot, you really can't see somebody coming, south to north on that thing. So maybe we enter into a discussion. Is it state and county?
Well, Fairview Drive in that section is a state route, so it's state maintained. I do believe they have a project potentially to improve that section of the road, but of course, like many other projects, funding is in question.
State, okay, the state.
Shift, SH. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the next is the complex at Fisher Park. There is a carryover $550,000 that was intended to be seed money for a possible expansion of the complex. However, after considering the current and potential tournaments, the cost of a expanded facility estimated at a minimum of $4.5 to $5 million, and the condition of our facility compared to others in the market, we recommend the funding be instead used for needed and overdue improvements. There are 5 primary improvements that we think are necessary. Primarily, first and foremost, to renovate the fields. If you look at the pictures, our fields are not in great shape. Athletic fields today are typically laser graded, which means that the fields are to an optimal topography within 1/4 of an inch. And that piece of lumber up there is a 2x4, so you can tell that we're probably 3 to 4 inches off of grade. And again, the standard now is less than 1/4 of an inch off. So we are at a point where our fields warrant a thorough and complete renovation. Number 2, we'd like to add a playground, which is a standard amenity in these facilities. Number 3, improve the main entrance from West 5th Street and pedestrian entry from the parking lot. Number 4, add additional seating and shade structures. And number 5, make improvements to the 5th field over on the other side of the parking lot. In short, the facility is 30 years old and has had no significant renovations or improvements in that time. These proposed improvements are based on feedback from tournament sponsors and promoters. The complex has a great reputation for hosting successful events, and deservedly so. But new and upgraded facilities across the state have raised the bar. For these reasons, we think the best use of the funds at the complex would be for needed renovations and updates to ensure it remains among the premier facilities in the state.
There's a crown back there on that outfield grass, and if you take a fire hose and blow that dirt that's in that crown back in there, you're going to catch up a bunch. We had to do that at Westland several times. And is there any discussion about making any of those fields grass? Because when you play state tournament here, all these other softball tournaments, they got grass infields. And this got there,
Again,
what are you shaking
first
your
to
head
Amanda
about?
for technical questions.
Mayor, I would say at the current time, we're not considering grass because we do as much baseball as we do softball. And depending upon the type of play, whether you're USSSA, BPA, Little League, depending upon the type of play, they have different preferences and field standards. So we try to manage all of those the best we can to optimize play, bookings, revenues.
And then the 10 events a year you give to CVB, where's that figure in there?
Those 8 figure in the agreement that is currently under discussion, Mayor.
Oh, good, okay. Still think they ought to be grass. Ball bounce is so different when it hits that skinned infield versus these kids that are playing on grass all the time. Scoots instead of, yes.
I will be happy to analyze that cost for you.
Well, you got $550,000, because you.
Yeah, I won't touch that.
But before we do any work out there, we'll come back to the commission and say this is a more thorough evaluation, and we'll be happy for the commission to redirect us.
Thank you, Mayor. Have we had any discussions, for example, with the CVB on not necessarily approval, but just simply a partnership of some of the funds that are basically created through heads in the beds that they collect to be able to help with some of the cost of this facility or this upgrade?
We regularly have conversations with the CVB and their sports marketing director, Jared Bratcher. And I would definitely encourage the point at which we look at putting these funds into that facility, continuing that discussion a little deeper, sir.
There's a state statute with that where the fiscal court has to spend that money from the head tax anyway.
Mhm.
They gave money to the Park Center and different places like that. You're going to put up over $500,000 in that field versus trying to expand it so we could have 100 teams at a time, because we don't have that, correct?
That would be my recommendation. If you'll remember, we work solid with the county in a partnership, and we manage oftentimes 96 to, we have had as many as 140 in the past between our two locations. So as long as that partnership holds, I would say that would be the more prudent way to spend our dollars.
So there's no complaint from the hotel owners about not having big enough tournaments in softball and baseball to fill all the beds?
I think the summertime is less of a concern from the hotel owners. What I hear more about is what can we do to help drive revenues through the fall and winter months.
Okay, thanks.
You're
Anybody
welcome.
else? Mr. Glenn?
Yeah. So the work you're going to do on the fifth field, as I recall, the fifth field is more like a practice facility. Is there any potential with this money to convert that fifth field into an actual usable field? I'm not sure it works because I think there's some tree line back there and some limitations in scope. But I just wonder, because you say part of it would be to upgrade that field.
Depending upon what our true cost is to actually make the repairs and add the drainage to those fields. The current fields do not have drain. We drain on grade. And I would look at the needs that we have on drainage, number one priority with the field. That being said, we would like to make some additions to the fifth field if money allows, in regards to improving that for usage for fans and spectators, adding a fence, adding some electric so we could do a scoreboard at that location and make it a manageable and usable field. It would be no longer than a 225 fence.
We have to build up the infield considerably once. It's underwater half the time.
And our partnership with Kentucky Legend, just briefly, what I saw sign up, I mean, I know they're going to do some things. What's their biggest contribution? And I know we're thrilled to have them as a partner. But
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to defer that question to Chris Carey. He's my complex manager, my courses manager, and he worked that deal. So I'd like to give him that opportunity to speak to that, please.
Is that okay?
Hello, Chris Carey, Recreation Manager. The deal we did with SFG, they sponsored, instead of one field or two fields, they sponsored all four. It's a $45,000 deal in total. It's a 3-year agreement. They give us half of it in cash and half of it in kind. So they are the official hot dog of Fisher Park. And then we also use it. So $7,500 a year is what we get in kind and $7,500 cash.
Well, I just say if there's any chance to get them to be a bigger partner with an expansion, go for it. I mean, you've got your foot in the door.
Yeah.
See if you can go further.
Well, we
'cause they've
started
been a great
last
corporate
year,
partner.
and we started with the $2,500 in-kind sponsorship last year, and we grew that to what we have. So it is growing. It's helping our golf course so well. So it's a good partnership. They're a good partner.
Mayor, I would point out
Appreciate
our
it.
appreciation for them. They do that, but they do a lot for Spectra, Tim
yeah.
and Laura. They do a lot of great work.
I just would like to have known about this partnership before I read about it in the paper. That would have been handy, because you go to the health park and somebody asks you a question about it, and you hadn't read the paper yet, and you got department heads making deals that I, as a mayor, didn't know, and I don't know if the rest of you knew about it either, but I'm glad you did. I think it's great, but give us a heads up before it hits the paper. I'd appreciate that.
We'll do that, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome.
Moving back to the general fund, Mayor, Commissioners, the city provides support to non-city agencies. I'll be in yellow tab 23, which lists support to the arts. Total support this year we're recommending is $865,594. That includes a 2% increase, the same thing as Social Security, or what the agency requested, the lesser of those two amounts. So if an organization didn't request a full amount or didn't request an increase, they got what they requested if it's a lesser amount. I'll let you review that for a minute before we move on.
Mr. Parrish, if I may. The $81,000 listed for the Bluegrass Museum utilities, is that capped?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's capped in terms of the in lieu of,
Yeah,
when the
it-
in lieu of is reached.
In lieu of it, well, okay.
Part of the
So
total.
when we as a city reach our
Correct.
full cap.
Doesn't necessarily incentivize them to keep their thermostat at 62 and when it's 94 outside, or vice versa in the wintertime, correct?
You're correct. I'll wait to get an indication the commission's ready to move on before I move on past that.
I would like to know about contracts for these buildings that we own. You know, like, we're gonna be owning the Bluegrass Museum, so, that's gonna be the city taxpayers' building, correct?
We'll own the building, yes, Mayor. It's leased to the Bluegrass
Okay.
Museum.
What about the, Fine Arts Museum? How's that, right?
Fine Arts Museum is divided in two. I'm looking at Wayne. One half of it.
Poor Wayne.
One half of it we own, one half of it they own.
Okay. All right, and then the area museum.
That's our building, and we lease it to the area museum for $1 a year, I believe.
That is correct. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Move on if anybody else doesn't have anything.
Still at tab 23 on the bottom are the social services. Social services support, $424,000, down almost $242,000. You'll note and recall we discussed last year that $1 million payment to OCTC to construct the Advanced Technology Center. That was paid $250,000 a year over 4 years. Last year was the last year for that. That is now paid off.
So did these people get 2% increase? Or
2%
same thing?
increase or what they requested, whichever is lower.
Okay. We also own the Mundy Center, I guess, too, huh?
I'm sorry, Mayor?
We also own the Elizabeth Mundy Center building as well. Okay.
And finally, government services. Total amount of that funding is $603,343. That's up $1,771. And you'll note the continued $100,000 plus up for the airport, us and the county.
That 2 more years?
I'm thinking
Was
it
it
was,
started
this is
for?
this may be the last year.
Year
I'll have to
deal?
look. I think it was 3 years and this is the last year, but I will check on that. And that completes the agencies. Now, to close out the expenditure discussion, this is not a reminder for the commission, it's a reminder for everyone listening at home that governmental budgeting is about priorities. There are never enough dollars to go around for every desired project. So let me sum up expenditure priorities. We'll move to the front of the book. We'll change colors on you. We'll go to blue tab number 1. There are only two blue tabs. Blue tab number 1. And you'll see that 46% of spending out of the general fund is for public safety, police and fire. That's clearly the priority. That trails down to the support services such as admin, IT, finance, personnel to keep the whole engine running, down to infrastructure, engineering, street, property maintenance, the parking garage. It trails all the way down with a total general fund spending of $156,000 plus subsidies, debt service, and capital transfers. The total general fund budget is $54,883. Now that completes the expenditure side of the brief. I'd invite you to turn to tab 2, where we'll ask Angela Hamrick to discuss the revenue projections. Though, Mayor, if you desire, this might be a convenient time to break between expenditures and revenues, if you want to break for 5 minutes, or we're prepared to go ahead.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Break it.
Bill.
I'm going to recognize Angela Hammer.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioners, if you want to go to the Revenue Summary tab in your budget book.
I can smell coffee all the way up.
I'm going to be, Blue tab 2, I'm going to be referencing page 1A and 1B. Okay, our general fund has 118 individual revenue accounts. This sounds like a lot, but it helps us to break down our revenues into the types of activity by department and by activity. It provides for increased transparency and more efficient tracking and trending analyses. What you see here on the slide is not our 118 revenue accounts. This is those accounts condensed down and grouped accordingly. Developing the city's revenue budget is truly a combination of art and science. Many factors are looked at. We look at historical analyses, newspaper articles. We meet with management at the Economic Development Corporation to get from them a forward look at what may be coming to town and any growth in companies that are already here. We also meet with local developers to get their insight as well. We reach out to the KLC, the Kentucky League of Cities, and Frankfurt on items affected by legislation such as municipal aid and the LGEA mineral coal severance tax. On this slide, you're going to see our top 5 revenue sources. They account for $45,081,046, or 81% of the total general fund revenues. I will speak to each one of these in the following slides. This budget reflects no new requests for tax increases except for property tax. If you will recall, during last year's budget session, we requested your permission to increase the IPLF, the insurance premium license fee. That approval was made last year. So we will be seeking your approval this year for property tax increase. Any other increases in these revenue accounts will come from growth in the revenue base. Our occupational license fee. This is otherwise known as the payroll withholding tax that is withheld from the employer from an employee's paycheck. Our rate is 1.78%. Of the 1.78%, 1.45% goes to the general fund for the general operations of our city. The 0.33% goes into your community vision fund that Nate presented and discussed earlier. This budget reflects growth of $350,487, or 2% over prior year budget. Thanks to the Commission for making the decisions to lay the foundation for companies to either relocate here or expand. We expect to see 2% growth in occupational license fees for 2018 and 19. Yes, Mayor.
Explain to me that quickly. Don't take a lot of time. It was 1.33, and then it got increased a little bit somewhere along the line.
Yes, Mayor.
That was a 0.9 or something?
Yeah, it was effective July 2015, and what we had done in our original budget was propose to sell Hillcrest. And so we were going to use those sales proceeds to...
You were going to do what at Hillcrest?
We were going to sell the golf course, is what we had presented in our budget, and we were going to use those sale proceeds to help operate our city. Well, the Commission at that time voted against that. So we lost those sales proceeds, so we needed revenues. So in lieu of selling the golf course, we had to increase the occupational net profit rate by 0.06. So it went from 1.33 to 1.39 at that point.
Just goes into, that's where the 1.78 ends up, right? Okay.
That's correct, yeah. The total was 1.39, then it went to 1.78. That's correct. And so we increased it 0.39 when we went from the 1.39 to the 1.78.
Thank you.
And that was effective July 2017 is when we went to the 1.78, just the budget that we're in. The next slide represents our property tax. It's the city's second largest revenue stream. Keeping in line with what Moody's had recommended, this budget reflects a slight increase in the rate to obtain the 4% growth in revenues that Kentucky statute allows us to raise the amount of revenue to without having to go to referendum. Remember that with somewhat recent debt issues, Moody's lowered our credit rating that the city, stating that the city ought to be utilizing this avenue of increasing property tax rates. They see this as a stable revenue stream to the city and not as economically sensitive. We raised that rate last year, which Moody's, I'm sure, has noticed as they have been keeping in touch with us and monitoring our progress. The preliminary assessment numbers for the fiscal year 2018 look to be up about 2.53%. So that is going to take up part of that 4%. So due to this increase in the assessments, the increase in the rate will need to be, won't have to be 4%. The rate will be less needed to obtain that 4% growth in the revenue, which is offset, like I said, by the growth in the assessments. Based on preliminary numbers, we don't have the state certified assessment yet, but based on the preliminary numbers, we're looking to increase the rate from the current 0.2620 to 0.2658. This represents an average increase of 35 cents per month to the average homeowner. The final rate to be set is subject to the state certified assessments, and I will present that to you in July or August when those numbers become available. Our next slide represents the OMU cash dividend. We increased it 2.5% in accordance with the city's agreement with OMU. OMU is budgeting accordingly. I must emphasize caution here to the Commission. What with the uncertainty of OMU's future, closing their production plant, possibly buying electricity from the grid, we must be mindful of the potential uncertainty of this revenue stream, as well as the no-cost electricity received as payment in lieu of taxes being paid, as would be paid, required of a private corporation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right.
Did you say it was going to be 35 cents?
On the property tax?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Commissioner. On the property tax, the rate that we are projecting to go to, thinking we may go to, looks like it may be an average of 35 cents per month to the average homeowner.
That doesn't sound like a lot, but I had someone to call me about this OMU rate increase, and people are trying to decide whether or not they need to pay OMU or buy medicine or do whatever, you know. And if I don't know what we can do, but you know, if you don't have any money, 35 cents is $10 to you. I don't know what I'm asking you to do. I just go ahead. I'm just thinking out loud. It's just.
Well, I think it's a valid observation, Commissioner. I would remind the viewing public that we do have the homestead exemption available to people who are age 65 or disabled. Mm-hmm. So they can contact the PVA, the local property valuation assessor office, and they can apply for that homestead exemption, and that would help them greatly. For those outside of that, I think it's a valid observation.
Not to debate the 35 cents, but Commissioner, we'd have to take something out of the budget, the value of that property tax increase, and not only this year, but compounded into the future. Remember when we didn't take the property tax increase for 8 years, it wasn't just that small amount, it was that amount compounded over 8 years that we lost.
Yeah, and just to put that in the proper light, we lost revenues of in the neighborhood of $7 million.
Oh, I know.
We lost $7 million not taking that property tax increase over 8 years. And it's just a compounding effect to the city. Besides losing the revenues, Moody's lowers our credit rating, which makes us have a higher interest rate on our bonds. And so it's a perpetual cyclical downward spiral. So all that costs the city more, having to seek revenues from other sources. So and that's why we are proposing to take this property tax increase, because it is minimal, spread out, and the homestead exemption is there for people to take advantage of.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would also like to add that $7 million that we lost those 8 years, that was our base revenue. We're continuing to lose from that forward to the tune of 1.8 to 2 million a year that we're losing. And back to the OMU cash dividend, I think I was finished on that, if there's no questions. So now we're on to the insurance premium license fee. We currently have a rate of 8%. And what this represents is a fee that is paid on the premiums that a person has on their homeowner's insurance, their car insurance, any insurance a person may have. This 8% is applied to their premium. The commission voted to increase this premium from 8% to 10% during last year's budget. And so this will take effect in this year's budget. It will take effect July 1st, 2018. This was, let's see here, the additional 2% that you all voted in is exempt from individual health plans, which will be helpful to those folks. And I wanted to say that note of the 10% total that we collect, 6% is dedicated to the general fund. The remaining 4% is being directed to the downtown revitalization to pay the debt service on those bonds. The next slide discusses our net profits. We're budgeting those to remain flat from last year. You'll notice that the rates are in line and the same as what they are for occupational. And I know there's been some discussion and questions about the Tax Reform Act. The experts to be, and things I've read up on, they believe that most, if not all, business owners will use any savings that they might incur from this to reinvest. They're going to expend on their capital or reinvest in their employees, expand their business. And it just any prudent business owner is going to try to strategize their tax liability and decrease that. So we're keeping that flat.
I've got one quick question. One of the confounding issues, though, that we had last year and trailing into the year before was that some companies have changed how they do their bookkeeping on this. And as a result, we were not getting, as I understand, we were not getting the amounts we'd gotten in the past. And we were looking, there really wasn't much we could do about that. Is that trend continuing?
I'm guessing you're referring to companies, local companies who were owned locally and who were purchased then by national companies. Yeah, that's out of our control. And I see that as part of their tax portfolio. These companies might buy a company who has a large net income to offset that against another company that they own who is operating at a loss. And that goes back to that tax strategy that companies will use to minimize their tax liability. But yeah, there's no way for us to have any control over that, what international companies would purchase a local company.
But for the purposes of the public, how big an impact does that have on our ability to collect this tax? How much are we losing, in other words, maybe in a percentile?
Well, it depends on what local company was purchased. It depends on were they operating at a loss or were they operating at a profit. There's a lot of unknowns in that formula. Now, the one particular year that I think you're referring to where we did see a decrease, it was a local company who was doing quite well, who was purchased by a international company, and they offset that against their other companies having losses. So, yes, that did impact us, Commissioner. Did that answer your question?
Sure. I can get specifics later, but thank you, and I appreciate it, and thank you, Mayor.
That concludes my presentation if there's no other questions.
Mayor, Commissioners, that brings us to the last portion of the brief. We've talked about expenditures and revenues. Now I'd like to talk about, if adopted, what our forecast is for the future. This chart shows you what we projected last year, but also what we're looking at today. It's updated. The left-hand portion shows you the years of that four-year plan where we said we were going to build our reserve. That April 17 is what we projected last year. You can see, for example, we projected to draw down the reserve by $258,000 this year, and it goes down the years. The next column shows you our updated projections. Now, there are two stories here. The first part of the story is good, and that is in 17-18, we have a positive swing of over $800,000. That's accounted for by increased revenues, partly driven by an increase in the Riverport dividend. Mayor, you were able to secure that for us. Property taxes are doing well, and the IPLF. Secondly, though, in 17-18, we can't hire staff. Those 7 police officers you authorized us to hire last year, we haven't hired those yet. We've been unable to. So those savings combine to gain us a positive swing of $800,000. Then you look at 18-19, those savings that we go into the year with, plus the fact that you authorized the sale of property to the Riverport, that we deferred consummating that deal to the start of next year to cover next year, to hold us out in 18-19. So we're pretty solid for 18-19. We're going to finish 17-18 well. We're pretty solid for 18-19. I think this is a good, solid budget. The second part of the story, though, is looking ahead 19-20 and 20-21. You'll see in 19-20 we start to lose ground. The gain is only $97,000 versus almost $1 million. That's because those pension costs, unless we find some more property to sell, we're no longer able to cover those costs without cutting expenditures or seeking new revenues. And then 2021, we actually have to dip into the reserve again. Now that's a long way in the future, but that's what it looks like. Let me show you graphically. This is the original graph. You're all too familiar with this graph from last year with 4 years of declining savings. Then we were to bottom it out and hold steady and then start to climb back up, with the red line being the minimum level of acceptable savings. Now we've updated that for the new year. The difference is the yellow line is the new savings requirement. It's up just a little bit because the state has given us more cost with the pension plan. You'll see the green bars are where we think our savings reserve will be. So just as we just spoke, 17, 18, 18, 19 are pretty solid based off those increased revenues, much of which was from sales. 1920 starts to level out, and then 2021, when the pension is really grabbing hold of us and we're no longer selling property to cover that, it starts to dip down again. And we don't know what the future holds after 2021. I'll tell you, these projections are difficult to make. We don't know how solid it's going to be. We don't know what the economy is going to do or what the state's going to do with the pension plan. We know their tentative plan for now. But that is a look of what it looks like forecast-wise.
Mr. Parrish?
Yes, sir.
You might ought to explain to him about the collars on the pension, you know, how it increased in the 12 each so far as what we look like, so people understand.
You mean the limitation?
Well, how much it's going to increase each year, because
Yeah.
it's a 12% collar, I believe, and so.
12% collar, and I think I've got a
You already
slide.
got it up there somewhere?
I think there's a slide. I've got to find it.
Because it's confusing, because people think, well, it's just 12%. Well, it's
up in our
12,
personnel cost.
and then
We've got
12 more on top of that 12.
It's compounded. So this is what, because I'm getting close. 22 the other way?
No,
Okay.
you had it.
No,
You just got somebody shooting at me.
Right.
Right there.
Look at that.
Yeah, there you go.
These are our additional pension costs. Now, 17, 18, we saw it go up $380,000. 18, 19, 817,000. 19, 20, 830, almost 831,000. 2021, almost $1 million for total cost for that 4-year period. I want to point out, this is not the fault of the staff, not the fault of the sitting commission or the previous commission. This is the state pension fund, wherever you point the finger, was underfunded. So now as a result, all local governments, this has been passed to you to solve, to find $3 million. So we've tried to build a budget to absorb that, which we do this year and next year.
So we were paying it 100%, and you had 2 in 18. So you had 12 more in 19 to your 100% you've already been paying. And I would propose right now we begin the process of telling them we ain't paying it.
We looked at that, Mayor. Angela,
you know,
actually,
go ahead.
Angela actually phoned KLC's legal department to ask some advice. Do you have that sheet?
Yeah, I have it right here. Yeah. I reached out to the Legislative Research Department at KLC.
Yeah.
They just, pardon?
Me too, go ahead.
Okay. Well, what they indicated to me would be that the KRS board would enforce the rates through court action is what their determination is. And they said unless you have a new winning legal argument, which would be unlikely, they said then we would get delinquent billings with interest and penalties
Well,
and possibly fines.
Well, we could give them our assets, the crappy roads, bridges, all the things like that. They're welcome to that. But it's if somebody sold you a new car, and then 2 years later they came back and said, oh, by the way, I forgot to charge you for FM radio and all that stuff. I need another $250. Would you pay them? Nope, me neither. That's my point. So home rule and all that, I think we ought to begin the process of talking about it. Tell them, find another way. Quit killing these cities. We paid it 100% since 1958 or whatever it was. So just editorializing a little bit.
Staff would say to the pastor, amen, hallelujah, preach on.
Yeah, preach on. In one ear and out the other. But I don't want to, I think it's a shame. Go ahead. Now you can go back through all those.
We're essentially done here, Mayor. What we've done is presented to you then our recommendations, and we realize this is just from listening to you throughout the year where we think you want to go with this budget. Now is the time where we'll look to the commission to provide us their changes. We are on a compressed timeline. Again, I want to point the finger back at the state. Usually a month ago, we're in this process, we're discussing it, giving you a lot of time to make changes. We're pretty compressed now because we have to have a budget by the end of June, or the old budget stays in effect, which is not enough to continue through. For complex issues, if you want to make major changes in this to budget, we'd ask for your indication of where you're going by Friday, because we're going to then have to go back and study it, research it, find cost, and see how it matches, everything filters through to another department. Simple changes, if you were to say, I want this line number to have an extra $20,000, I want you to take it from there, we could take that as late as the 1st of June and still be able to accomplish that. But that allows us to have first reading on the 5th of June, second reading our normal commission meeting, and have it enacted by the end of the month, assuming that there still might be some, at first reading or second reading, there might be some adjustments. So that's sort of the compressed timeline through no fault of yours, really no fault of ours. We're trying to squeeze this in. Mayor, Commissioners, we're looking for your direction either now or in the next few days, how you want to adjust it, change it, or any questions you may have on the budget.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What's the cost across the board of 1 year's replacement plan of all our stuff?
The total replacement plan for the whole city?
For 1 year? Danae, you know right off the top of your head.
It fluctuates, Mayor, from year to
Here we
year.
go again.
Well, because the equipment, the vehicles,
What the cost of each
roofs,
one of them.
asphalt.
Can I just give me a
It's all
ballpark
on a
figure?
different schedule.
$150 or?
No, I would say anywhere from $2 million to $3 million.
And she's spot on. It's 2.9 million for
A year.
18-19.
Okay. So, like, what if we just skipped a year? What does that, my point is, can we think about, what if we skipped 1 year and didn't do everything we're supposed to do in Bobby Whitmer's world-famous replacement plan or wherever it came from, and see what that would do, hypothetically, I guess, to, I know Wayne would have a heart attack, but I mean, at some point in time, we have to stop this bleeding and start thinking about where we're going to get some money. And looking at that thing, I don't, you know, other than.
We can, and we'll look at that. We'll start that immediately.
You know, just take a look at it and see and say, no, you're out of your league again. But
First thing that comes to my mind is it's a short-term gain.
Exactly.
Long-term costs. Another commission, a couple, 3, 5 years down the road, we'll have to pay for it.
Too bad for them. No, I'm just saying, I just was thinking, you know, there is some money there, and to help out specifically one of our struggling departments, I don't know that we can't at least look at it and parcel or whatever you can do to maybe help one of them and at least get them started. And
We'll come back with that, Mayor.
Okay.
Very quickly.
If I can make just one last comment, please, sir.
That's it. One more.
Thank you, sir.
You mean for you?
Yes, okay. A big shift has occurred in this budget that really everyone needs to just truly recognize. In the capital projects page, which is page 149?
That me.
Yeah, 149. You know, over the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen line item numbers in there of 5 million, 3 million, 7, 8 million. This coming year, you see a total capital projects of only $65,000. So this budget has pulled back on the capital projects that have been done over the years to basically look at what is needed throughout the rest of our community. And that's a dramatic number. When you see a negative $25 million that shows up on the change from one time frame to another time frame, that's dramatic. And we issued no debt. That was zip is what we did. And then again, so that to me indicates staff has done a fantastic job. Police, fire, everybody here has done an awesome job to make this where we believe we wanted our city to go to and reflect those needs and wants. It's there in this budget. So thank you very much.
No, I didn't have anything.
Okay, well, thanks, staff. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Y'all have any questions for us?
No, Mayor, thank you.
Definitely glad to. Okay, you gonna do this? Motion to adjourn?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Adjourn.